Chapter 1: Why You Forget Names Instantly. Have you ever met someone new, heard their name clearly, and then completely forgotten it within seconds? You're not alone in this gentle mystery of the mind. Your brain, in its infinite wisdom, treats names differently than other information. Unlike faces, which your mind naturally connects to emotions and stories, names float in your consciousness like leaves on water, beautiful but ephemeral. When someone tells you their name, your brain files it away in what we call working memory, a temporary holding space that can only juggle a few pieces of information at once. But here's the soothing truth: your mind is constantly prioritizing what matters most in each moment. While you're processing their smile, their handshake, the context of where you're meeting, their name quietly slips away unless you make a conscious effort to anchor it. Think of your brain as a gentle librarian who's managing millions of books. Names, without context or emotional connection, are like unmarked volumes that get misplaced easily. But when you create a story around a name, perhaps it reminds you of your favorite aunt, or it rhymes with something meaningful, suddenly that name has a place to rest in your memory's comfortable embrace. This forgetfulness isn't a flaw, it's your mind's way of focusing on what feels most important in social moments: the warmth of connection, the flow of conversation, the dance of human interaction. Rest easy knowing that everyone experiences this same gentle amnesia, and tomorrow brings new opportunities to remember. Chapter 2: The Magic Number 7. Deep in your mind lies a beautiful limitation, discovered by psychologist George Miller, who found that your consciousness can comfortably hold about 7 pieces of information at once. Imagine your working memory as a cozy room with 7 comfortable chairs, no more, no less. When an 8th piece of information tries to enter, something else must quietly leave to make space. This isn't a weakness, it's an elegant design. Your phone number has 7 digits for a reason. Your brain chunks information naturally, like how you remember a phone number as 555-0123 rather than 5550-123. Each chunk sits peacefully in one of those 7 mental chairs, creating order from chaos. Watch how your mind works its quiet magic throughout the day. When you walk into a grocery store, you might remember 7 items easily, but the 8th item starts to slip away like morning mist. Your brain compensates beautifully, though; it groups related items together, creating meaningful packages that fit comfortably in your mental space. This magical number explains why you feel overwhelmed when trying to juggle too many tasks at once. Your consciousness, like a gentle conductor, can only orchestrate 7 instruments simultaneously. Beyond that, the music becomes cacophony. Understanding this limitation brings peace. It's not that you're failing, it's that you're human. As you drift into sleep tonight, let your mind release all but the most essential thoughts. Allow your mental chairs to empty one by one, creating space for dreams and rest. 7 becomes 6, 6 becomes 5, until only peace remains. Chapter 3: Why You Remember Beginnings and Endings. Your memory has a gentle preference, like a favorite spot by the window where the light falls just right. It naturally gravitates toward beginnings and endings, holding them with special care while the middle portions fade like watercolors in rain. This beautiful phenomenon, known as the serial position effect, shapes how you experience everything from conversations to movies to the chapters of your life. Think about the last book you read or movie you watched. The opening scene likely remains vivid in your mind, and you probably remember how it ended, but the middle sections might feel softer, more dreamlike. Your brain's attention peaks during these transition moments, the fresh excitement of starting something new, and the satisfying completion of reaching an end. This happens because beginnings and endings carry emotional weight. When you meet someone new, those first few minutes are painted in bright colors in your memory. When you say goodbye, that final moment often crystallizes with surprising clarity. The middle conversations, though pleasant, drift together like clouds. Your mind does this to help you navigate life's rhythms. Beginnings signal new learning opportunities, so your brain pays close attention. Endings provide closure and lessons, so they're carefully stored for future reference. The middle portions, while experienced fully, don't need the same intense documentation. As you prepare for sleep, notice how you naturally remember the first thoughts of your day and anticipate tomorrow's beginning. Let the middle portions of today dissolve gently, knowing they served their purpose. Your mind will keep what matters most, filing away the beginnings and endings in its careful archives while you rest. Chapter 4: The Power of Repetition. Like water slowly carving canyons through stone, repetition shapes your mind with gentle persistence. Every time you encounter the same information, it travels a familiar neural pathway, making that path stronger and more permanent. This is your brain's way of saying, this must be important if it keeps coming back. Repetition works like a loving gardener tending the same plot of soil. The first time you learn something new, it's like planting a seed in unfamiliar ground. The second time, you're watering that seedling. The third time, you're helping it take root. With each repetition, the knowledge grows stronger and more resilient. Your childhood memories demonstrate repetition's gentle power. You remember nursery rhymes not because they were profound, but because you heard them countless times. The rhythm and familiarity carved comfortable grooves in your memory, creating pathways that remain clear decades later. But repetition isn't just about rote memorization, it's about creating comfort and mastery. When you drive the same route to work every day, your mind automates the journey, freeing your consciousness for other thoughts. When you practice a skill repeatedly, it becomes as natural as breathing. The most beautiful aspect of repetition is how it transforms effort into ease. What once required intense concentration becomes fluid and graceful. Your fingers find piano keys without thought, your mind recalls facts without strain. This is repetition's gift, turning the foreign into the familiar. Tonight, as you settle into your bedtime routine, appreciate the power of repetition. Each night you lie down in the same position, follow similar rituals, allow your mind to travel the same peaceful path toward sleep. This repetition isn't monotony, it's mastery of the art of rest. Chapter 5: Spacing Out Your Learning. Your brain learns best when information arrives like gentle rain rather than sudden downpours. This wisdom of spacing, discovered through careful research, reveals that your mind prefers to encounter new knowledge in comfortable intervals, with rest periods in between. Think of it as giving your consciousness time to breathe and integrate what it has received. When you cram information all at once, it's like trying to water a plant by dumping a bucket on its roots. Most of the water runs off, and the plant struggles to absorb what it needs. But when learning is spaced out over days or weeks, each encounter with the information finds your brain more prepared, more receptive, more capable of making lasting connections. This spacing effect happens because forgetting is actually part of learning. When you encounter information again after a brief forgetting period, your brain works a little harder to retrieve it. This effort, gentle though it may be, strengthens the memory pathways like a muscle that grows stronger with use. Imagine your memory as a library where books need time to find their proper shelves. Rush too many books in at once, and they pile up in confusion. But space them out, and each book finds its perfect place, accessible whenever you need it. Your librarian mind works most efficiently when given time to properly catalogue new arrivals. The most peaceful aspect of spaced learning is how it mirrors natural rhythms. Just as seasons change gradually, allowing plants to adapt and grow, your mind learns best when given time to rest between lessons. Each break allows new knowledge to settle comfortably into long-term memory. As you drift toward sleep tonight, trust that tomorrow's learning will build gently on today's foundation. Your mind will use these quiet hours to organize and integrate, preparing for new knowledge with the patience of growing things. Chapter 6: Tuning Out the World. Right now, as you listen to these words, your mind is performing a quiet miracle. It's filtering through thousands of potential sensations, the feeling of your clothes against your skin, the temperature of the air, background sounds, the weight of your body, and choosing to focus only on this voice, this message. This selective attention is one of your brain's most elegant gifts. Your consciousness works like a gentle spotlight, illuminating what matters most while allowing everything else to fade into a comfortable background. Without this ability, you would be overwhelmed by the constant symphony of sensations surrounding you every moment. Instead, your mind creates a bubble of focused awareness where you can think, learn, and simply be. This tuning out isn't ignorance, it's wisdom. Your brain has learned to recognize patterns, to distinguish between what needs attention and what can safely be ignored. The hum of the refrigerator, the feeling of your heartbeat, the slight pressure of air on your skin, all of these register in your awareness but remain peacefully in the background. Sometimes people worry that they're missing something important when they tune out the world. But consider how this ability serves you. It allows you to read a book in a noisy cafe, to have an intimate conversation in a crowded room, to find peace within yourself even when chaos surrounds you. Your mind's ability to focus is like a skilled conductor who knows exactly when each instrument should play and when it should rest. The result is not silence, but harmony, a carefully orchestrated experience where attention flows naturally to what serves you best. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, notice how your mind begins to tune out the day's concerns. Worries fade to whispers, tomorrow's tasks become distant echoes. This isn't escape, it's your consciousness wisely choosing rest over stimulation, peace over preoccupation. Chapter 7. Hearing your name in crowds. Even in the busiest, noisiest places, something magical happens when someone speaks your name. Suddenly, that familiar sound cuts through all other noise like a warm light penetrating fog. This phenomenon, known as the cocktail party effect, shows how your mind constantly monitors your environment for personally meaningful information, even when you think you're not paying attention. Your brain is like a devoted guardian, always listening for signals that matter to you. While you focus on a conversation with a friend, part of your consciousness quietly scans background chatter for important words, your name, the name of someone you love, or perhaps a topic that concerns you. It's as if you have a gentle alarm system that activates only for information that truly matters. This selective listening happens below the threshold of conscious thought. Your mind processes multiple conversations simultaneously, filtering them through your personal importance detector. Most background noise remains just that, background. But when something relevant appears, your attention shifts as naturally as turning toward a familiar voice calling your name. The beauty of this ability is how it protects and serves you. In our ancestors' time, hearing your name might have meant survival, someone warning you of danger or calling you to safety. Today, it connects you to your social world, ensuring you don't miss important information even when your attention is occupied elsewhere. Sometimes you might worry that you're not fully present when your mind wanders or when you're doing multiple things at once. But this name detection ability shows how sophisticated your awareness truly is. You're simultaneously engaged and vigilant, focused yet open to what matters most. As you settle into sleep tonight, appreciate how your mind will continue its gentle monitoring even in dreams. Part of your consciousness remains lovingly alert to your children's voices. Why? Chapter 8. Multitasking Myths. Here's a gentle truth that might surprise you: your mind doesn't actually multitask the way you might think it does. What feels like doing several things at once is really your consciousness switching rapidly between different activities, like a graceful dancer moving from one partner to another. Each transition happens so quickly that it creates the illusion of simultaneity. Your brain is designed for focused attention, not divided attention. When you think you're texting while watching TV, what's really happening is that your awareness shifts back and forth, a few seconds on the screen, a few seconds on your phone, back to the screen again. Each switch requires a moment of mental adjustment, like your eyes needing time to refocus when looking from near to far. This isn't a limitation to feel frustrated about, it's actually your mind's way of giving full attention to whatever deserves it most in each moment. True multitasking would mean diluting your focus so much that nothing receives the attention it deserves. Instead, your brain wisely chooses to give each task its moment in the spotlight. The myth of multitasking can create unnecessary stress when you feel like you should be doing more simultaneously. But research shows that people perform better and feel more satisfied when they give their full attention to one thing at a time. It's like the difference between having several casual acquaintances and one deep friendship. Depth often serves us better than breadth. Some activities can truly happen together, but usually one is automatic while the other requires attention. You can walk while talking because walking has become unconscious. You can listen to music while reading, but you'll find your comprehension is better when the music fades into background. Tonight, as you let go of the day's demands, embrace the peace of singular focus. Let your mind rest in one place, perhaps the rhythm of your breathing. Chapter 9: Missing what's right in front of you. Sometimes the most obvious things become invisible. You search everywhere for your glasses while they rest on your head, or look frantically for keys that are already in your hand. This isn't absent-mindedness, it's your brain being beautifully, efficiently human. Your mind is constantly making predictions about where things should be and what deserves attention. When something appears in an unexpected place, like glasses on your head instead of on a table, your brain may simply filter it out as irrelevant background information. This selective blindness happens because your attention is precious and limited. Your mind protects it by ignoring what it expects to be unimportant, sometimes missing what's right in front of you. It's like having an overly helpful assistant who occasionally hides exactly what you're looking for. Rather than being frustrated by these moments, appreciate them as reminders of how hard your mind works to keep you focused on what usually matters most. These small lapses are the price of having a brain sophisticated enough to prioritize and predict, a wonderful trade-off. The famous psychology experiments where people miss a gorilla walking through a basketball game show how powerfully attention shapes reality. When focused on counting passes, gorillas become invisible. This isn't inattention, it's focused attention working exactly as it should. Chapter 10: Selective Blindness. Your eye see everything, but your mind chooses what to notice. This gentle filtering creates a phenomenon called selective blindness, the way obvious changes can happen right in front of you without registering in your awareness. Your brain assumes familiar elements will remain stable, so it allocates attention to monitoring for changes instead. Think about your daily commute. You could navigate it in your sleep because your mind has mapped it so thoroughly that details become invisible through familiarity. This selective blindness serves you well. If your brain processed every visual detail consciously every time, you'd be exhausted within minutes. Instead, your visual system creates a simplified version of reality that includes only what seems important or changed. Sometimes this leads to amusing discoveries. You might suddenly notice your spouse rearranged the furniture, even though they did it days ago. Your mind had simply filled in the expected arrangement without really looking. When you finally do look consciously, the change appears magical. This same blindness makes you miss slow changes in people you see regularly. A friend might gradually lose weight or grow their hair, but because you see them often, each small change gets absorbed into your updated mental image without conscious notice. Researchers have found that people can miss a person in a gorilla suit walking through a basketball game when they're focused on counting passes. It seems impossible, but it reveals how narrowly focused attention can become when you're concentrating deeply on a specific task. Understanding selective blindness brings compassion for human limitations. We all miss things that seem obvious in hindsight. This shared blindness connects us, reminding us that everyone's perception is beautifully, necessarily incomplete. Chapter 11: Quick Mental Shortcuts. Your mind is constantly taking shortcuts, not out of laziness, but out of remarkable efficiency. These mental shortcuts, called heuristics, help you navigate daily life without becoming paralyzed by endless analysis. Like a GPS finding the fastest route, your brain finds the quickest path to reasonable decisions. Consider how you decide whether to trust someone new. You don't conduct a full investigation. Instead, your mind quickly processes cues like eye contact, tone of voice, and body language. This shortcut isn't foolproof, but it's usually accurate enough and infinitely faster than comprehensive analysis. These mental shortcuts evolved over thousands of years to keep your ancestors safe. If they heard rustling in the bushes, they couldn't debate whether it might be wind or a predator. The shortcut assume danger and react kept them alive, even if it occasionally meant running from a harmless rabbit. Today, your shortcuts help manage information overload. When you see a 4.5 stars on a product review, you don't read every comment. Your mind uses this summary as a shortcut to judge quality. When someone mentions your alma mater, you instantly feel connection. These shortcuts save mental energy for decisions that truly need careful consideration. The beautiful thing about mental shortcuts is how they free your consciousness for creativity and deeper thinking. By automating routine judgments, your mind creates space for imagination, problem-solving, and meaningful reflection. Your shortcuts handle background operations while you focus on what matters most. Chapter 12: Judging by First Impressions. Within seconds of meeting someone new, your mind forms a detailed impression of their personality, trustworthiness, and competence. This rapid judgment feels almost magical, yet it's based on your brain's sophisticated pattern recognition system processing countless subtle cues instantly. Your unconscious mind reads faces like a skilled detective, noting the upturn of lips that suggests warmth, the steadiness of gaze that implies confidence, or shoulder posture that indicates openness. These micro-observations combine with context clues, clothing, posture, speech patterns, to create an instant sketch of who this person might be. These first impressions aren't random guesses. They draw from your lifetime of experience with human behavior, creating predictions based on patterns you've observed before. Someone whose smile reaches their eyes triggers positive associations with genuine people you've known. A weak handshake might remind you of others who seemed less confident. Research shows people can predict teaching effectiveness, election outcomes, and even criminal behavior with surprising accuracy after viewing someone for just seconds. Your intuitive understanding of human nature, honed through years of social interaction, operates faster than conscious thought. Yet first impressions, while often accurate, aren't infallible. They can be influenced by your mood, recent experiences, or unconscious biases. The person who seems aloof might actually be shy. The wisdom lies in holding first impressions lightly, useful as initial guides but open to revision as you gather more information. Chapter 13: Getting Stuck on Numbers. Numbers have a peculiar power over your mind, acting like gentle anchors that influence your thoughts and decisions in ways you might not notice. This anchoring effect means the first number you encounter becomes a reference point, subtly shaping all estimates and judgments that follow. Imagine shopping for a sweater and the first one costs $200. Suddenly, a $120 sweater seems reasonable, even though you might have balked at that price if you'd seen the cheaper option first. That initial $200 anchored your sense of what sweaters should cost, making everything else feel relative to that first impression. Your brain uses these numerical anchors because they provide structure in uncertain situations. When estimating something unfamiliar, like how long a project might take or what a fair price might be, your mind gratefully latches onto any relevant number as a starting point for calculations. This anchoring happens even with random numbers that have nothing to do with your decision. People asked to write down their phone number's last 2 digits and then estimate a historical artifact's age will be influenced by those arbitrary digits. Your mind, faced with uncertainty, reaches for any numerical handholds it can find. The gentle trap of anchoring is how it limits your thinking to a narrow range around that first number. Instead of considering the full spectrum of possibilities, your estimates hover near the anchor, like a boat that can only drift so far from its mooring. This can lead to missed opportunities when the anchor is misleading. Understanding anchoring can free you from its subtle influence. When facing important numerical decisions, consider multiple reference points or ask what you might think if you'd never heard that first number. Chapter 14: How Words Control Your Choices. The words used to describe your options can gently steer your decisions like a river guiding a leaf downstream. This framing effect shows how your mind responds not just to facts, but to the language that presents those facts. The same information, dressed in different words, can lead to completely different choices, revealing the subtle power of language over thought. Consider how differently you might feel about ground beef labeled 80% lean versus 20% fat. Both describe identical products, but your mind responds more positively to the framing that emphasizes what's present rather than what's absent. The word lean suggests health and quality, while fat triggers concerns about health and diet. Your choice might change based solely on this linguistic packaging. This word magic happens because your brain processes language emotionally as well as logically. Words carry connotations, memories, and associations that influence your feelings before your rational mind has time to analyze. Surgery has a 95% survival rate feels different from 5% of patients die during surgery, even though both statements contain identical information. Politicians, marketers, and persuaders of all kinds understand this power of framing. They know that calling something a tax relief program will be received differently than a key spending reduction plan, even if both describe the same policy. The frames create different emotional landscapes in your mind, leading to different conclusions and preferences. The beautiful aspect of understanding framing is how it can liberate you from unconscious manipulation while helping you communicate more effectively. When you're aware that words shape perception, you can look beyond the frame to see the actual facts. You can also choose your own words more carefully, framing situations in ways that serve your highest good. Chapter 15: Throwing Good Money After Bad. There's a gentle trap that catches even the wisest minds, the tendency to continue investing in something that's no longer serving you, simply because you've already invested so much. This sunk cost fallacy whispers seductively that walking away would mean losing everything you've already put in, when sometimes the kindest choice is to stop and redirect your energy elsewhere. Picture someone sitting through a terrible movie because they paid for the ticket, or continuing a relationship that's causing pain because of all the years they've already invested. Your mind, which hates waste and values consistency, creates a story that more investment will somehow justify past investment, even when evidence suggests otherwise. This happens because your brain struggles to treat past investments as truly gone. Those sunk costs feel alive and demanding, like debts that must be honored rather than lessons that have already been learned. The money spent, time invested, or energy devoted becomes a weight that pulls you forward even when wisdom would counsel a different direction. The sunk cost fallacy reveals something beautiful about human nature: your deep commitment to seeing things through, your loyalty to your past choices, your reluctance to give up on what once seemed promising. These are admirable qualities that serve you well in many situations. The key is recognizing when persistence becomes stubbornness. Freedom comes from understanding that past investments can't be recovered by future investments. The money spent on that stock that keeps falling won't come back just because you buy more shares. The energy invested in a career that no longer fits won't be wasted if you choose a new path. Sometimes the most honoring response to past investment is to apply its lessons elsewhere. Tonight, as you release the day's decisions and concerns, practice letting go of what's already gone. Chapter 16: Working Backwards to Solutions. Sometimes the most elegant path to a solution involves starting at the destination and tracing your steps backward to where you stand now. This backward reasoning, like following a stream to its source, can reveal pathways that forward thinking might never discover. Your mind, when freed from the assumption that problems must be solved in chronological order, can find surprising shortcuts and insights. Imagine you're planning a dinner party. Instead of starting with "what should I cook?" you might begin with "what do I want my guests to feel when they leave?" Working backward from that emotional destination, perhaps warm, satisfied, and connected, helps you choose not just the menu, but the lighting, music, and flow of the evening. The desired outcome illuminates the necessary steps. This reverse engineering works because it transforms vague problems into specific targets. When you know exactly where you want to end up, your mind can more easily identify what needs to happen to get there. It's like having a map where the destination is clearly marked. Suddenly the route becomes obvious, even if it wasn't visible when you were just wandering forward. Mathematicians and scientists use backward reasoning to solve complex problems. They assume the solution exists and work backward to understand what conditions would make it possible. Detective stories follow this pattern too, starting with the crime and working backward through clues to find the perpetrator. The ending reveals the beginning. In your daily life, backward reasoning can bring clarity to everything from career decisions to relationship challenges. Instead of asking, "What should I do next?" you might ask, "What outcome would make me feel fulfilled?" and then trace backward to identify the steps that lead there. This approach often reveals that your desired future is more achievable than it seemed when viewed from your current position. Chapter 17: Solving by Comparison. Your mind is a natural pattern matcher, constantly comparing new situations to familiar ones, seeking the comfort of recognition in unfamiliar territories. This analogical thinking helps you solve problems by recognizing that what worked in one context might work in another, like finding that the key to one door might fit another lock as well. When faced with a challenging situation, your brain automatically searches through its vast library of experiences, looking for similar problems you've encountered before. The solution that worked when you had to motivate a reluctant teenager might apply to managing a difficult colleague. The strategy that helped you organize your closet might work for organizing your thoughts or your schedule. This comparison-based thinking is how innovation often happens. The inventor who created Velcro was inspired by the way burr seed stuck to his dog's fur. The Wright brothers applied their bicycle-making skills to flight. Solutions from nature, technology, relationships, or completely different fields can cross-pollinate, creating new approaches to old problems. Sometimes the most powerful analogies come from unexpected sources. A gardener's patience with slow-growing plants might teach you how to approach personal development. A chef's understanding of how flavors balance might help you think about balancing competing priorities in your life. The rhythm of music might illuminate the rhythm of effective communication. The key to analogical thinking is holding the comparison lightly, taking the useful elements while recognizing the differences. Not every aspect of the familiar situation will apply to the new one, but often enough similarity exists to provide a starting point, a framework for thinking, or at least inspiration for creative solutions. Chapter 18: Thinking Inside the Box. While creativity gurus often encourage thinking outside the box, there's profound wisdom in understanding how thinking inside the box actually serves you most of the time. Your mind naturally works within familiar frameworks and established patterns because these mental structures provide efficiency, reliability, and the solid foundation needed for clear thinking. Consider how your morning routine operates within the box of established habits. You don't reinvent breakfast every day or ponder the optimal toothbrushing technique each morning. These structured approaches free your mental energy for decisions that truly benefit from creative thinking. The box isn't a prison, it's a supportive framework that makes daily life manageable. Professional expertise develops through deep familiarity with a box of established knowledge and proven methods. An experienced surgeon works within the established procedures not because they lack creativity, but because these frameworks represent generations of refined wisdom. Innovation happens not by ignoring these structures, but by understanding them so deeply that improvements become possible. Your mind creates boxes naturally, categories, assumptions, standard operating procedures, because they work. When you drive, you follow traffic conventions not because you're uncreative, but because shared frameworks allow thousands of people to coordinate complex movements safely. The box of traffic rules enables the creativity of going wherever you want to go. Even your most creative moments often happen within some kind of structure. Poets work within the constraints of meter and rhyme. Musicians create within scales and harmonic progressions. Painters work within the boundaries of their canvas. These limitations don't restrict creativity, they channel it into powerful expressions. Chapter 19: Mental Habits That Trap You. Your mind, like water flowing down a hillside, tends to follow the same pathways over and over, carving deeper channels with each repetition. These mental habits, called cognitive rigidity, can become so automatic that you forget other routes exist. What once served as helpful shortcuts can sometimes become gentle prisons that limit your ability to see new possibilities. Think about how you solve problems or make decisions. You probably have favorite approaches that you turn to first. Perhaps you're someone who makes lists, or someone who talks through problems with friends, or someone who sleeps on difficult decisions. These habitual responses work well most of the time, but occasionally they can blind you to solutions that require a different approach entirely. Mental habits form because your brain loves efficiency. Once it finds a method that works, it marks that neural pathway as preferred, making it easier to access next time. This is wonderful when the habits serve you, like automatically checking for your keys before leaving the house, but less helpful when they prevent you from adapting to new situations that require fresh thinking. Sometimes you might notice yourself having the same types of arguments with people, or getting stuck in the same kinds of work problems, or falling into familiar patterns of worry or self-doubt. These repetitive cycles aren't character flaws, they are simply well-worn mental pathways that activate automatically when certain triggers appear. The beautiful thing about recognizing mental habits is that awareness itself begins to create flexibility. When you notice that you always respond to stress in the same way, or that you approach creative problems with the same methods, you suddenly have choice. You can still use your familiar approaches when they're helpful, but you're no longer trapped by them. Chapter 20: Rigid Thinking Patterns. Your mind has a natural tendency to create solid structures from flowing experiences, turning the fluid reality of each moment into fixed categories, permanent judgments, and unchanging beliefs. This mental solidifying process, called functional fixedness, helps you navigate a complex world but can sometimes freeze your thinking in ways that limit your options and creative potential. Consider how you think about the objects around you. A paperclip is for holding papers together, a hammer is for hitting nails, a chair is for sitting. Your mind creates these functional definitions automatically, which helps you use tools efficiently. But this same mental process can prevent you from seeing that a paperclip might make an excellent zipper pull, or that a hammer could work as a doorstop, or that a chair might become a step ladder. This rigid thinking extends beyond objects to people, situations, and even yourself. You might think of someone as the quiet one or the perfectionist, creating a mental box that makes it hard to notice when they show different qualities. You might view certain situations as inherently stressful or certain tasks as impossible for you, not because these judgments are true, but because your mind has solidified them into seemingly permanent categories. The pattern of rigid thinking often reveals itself in phrases like "I'm just not good at," or "that's just how things are, I always." These statements might contain some truth, but they also create invisible barriers that prevent you from exploring new possibilities. What feels like realistic self-awareness might actually be mental habits masquerading as unchangeable facts. Your brain creates these rigid patterns for good reasons. They provide predictability and reduce the mental energy needed to navigate daily life. If you had to completely reconsider every object, person, and situation each time you encountered them, you'd be exhausted within hours. Chapter 21: Blaming Others for Everything. Deep within your mind lives a gentle storyteller whose job is to make sense of everything that happens to you. This inner narrator has a curious bias. When good things happen to you, you tend to credit your own efforts, skills, and choices, but when things go wrong, your mind often looks outward for explanations, finding fault in circumstances, other people, or simple bad luck. This attribution pattern isn't selfishness or dishonesty, it's your psyche's way of protecting your self-esteem and sense of control. When you succeed at something, taking credit feels natural and helps build confidence for future challenges. But when you face setbacks, your mind compassionately shields you from harsh self-judgment by finding external factors to blame. Imagine you're late for an important meeting. If you arrive exactly on time despite traffic delays, you might think "I'm good at planning and managing time." But if you're late, your inner storyteller might focus on the unexpected traffic, the slow elevator, or the meeting that ran over schedule. Both responses help maintain your sense of being a capable person who generally makes good decisions. This protective mechanism extends to how you view others too. but in reverse. When someone else succeeds, you might attribute it partly to luck or circumstances, but when they fail, you're more likely to see it as reflecting their character or choices. Your mind is naturally more generous to yourself than to others, not from meanness but from the simple fact that you know your own intentions while you can only observe others' actions. Understanding this bias can bring both compassion and clarity to your relationships. When someone seems to be blaming everything on external factors, they're likely protecting themselves the same way you do. When you find yourself getting frustrated with others' excuses, you might recognize the very human tendency to be gentler with yourself than with others. Chapter 22: Judging Yourself vs. Others. Your mind has two different sets of courtroom procedures, one for judging your own actions and another for judging others' behavior. When evaluating yourself, you tend to be a compassionate judge who considers all the circumstances, pressures, and good intentions behind your choices. But when assessing others, you often become a stricter judge who focuses primarily on the observable outcomes and actions. This happens because you have complete access to your own inner world, your thoughts, feelings, constraints, and motivations. When you snap at someone, you know you were stressed, tired, and dealing with multiple pressures. Your inner judge considers all these mitigating factors. But when someone snaps at you, you only see the behavior itself, not the invisible struggles that might have caused it. Psychologists call this the actor-observer bias, and it shapes almost every social interaction you have. You judge your own driving based on your intentions and the challenges you're facing, while judging other drivers purely on their observable behavior. You forgive your own mistakes as understandable responses to difficult situations, while sometimes seeing others' mistakes as reflections of their character or competence. This isn't hypocrisy, it's a natural result of having different information available. You experience your own life from the inside, knowing every thought and feeling that influences your choices. But you experience others' lives from the outside, seeing only the final products of their internal processes. It's like comparing your rough draft to someone else's finished essay. The beautiful opportunity in recognizing this bias is developing what psychologists call the fundamental attribution error in reverse. Chapter 23: Performing Better in Groups. Something remarkable happens when you find yourself in the presence of others. Often, your performance naturally elevates beyond what you can achieve alone. This social facilitation effect transforms the energy of being watched or accompanied into enhanced focus and capability, like a musician who plays more beautifully in concert than in solitary practice. Your brain has evolved to be acutely aware of social presence. When others are around, even if they're not actively watching, some deeper part of your consciousness activates a heightened state of attention and energy. This probably served your ancestors well. Being around others could mean the difference between impressing potential mates, allies, or leaders, and being overlooked or rejected. This boost in performance is most noticeable when you're doing something you already know how to do well. A skilled runner might achieve a personal best during a race surrounded by competitors. A practice speaker might deliver their best talk to a live audience rather than to an empty room. The social energy doesn't create new abilities, but it amplifies existing ones. The presence of others seems to narrow your focus in beneficial ways, filtering out distractions and channeling your attention toward the task at hand. It's as if your consciousness recognizes that this moment matters more because it's shared, and responds by bringing more of your resources online. The gentle pressure of social attention becomes fuel for enhanced performance. Interestingly, this effect happens even when the others present aren't evaluating your performance or even paying attention to you. Simply being in a space with other people, like studying in a library or working in a cafe, can elevate your focus and productivity compared to working in isolation. There's something energizing about shared human presence. Of course, this social boost works best when you're confident in your abilities. Chapter 24: Slacking Off in Teams. Just as being around others can sometimes boost your performance, it can also create a subtle invitation to relax your efforts. When you're part of a group working toward a common goal, your individual contribution becomes less visible, and your mind might unconsciously dial down its intensity, trusting that others will pick up any slack. This social loafing isn't laziness, it's a natural response to shared responsibility. Think about the last time you participated in group applause. You probably clapped, but perhaps not as enthusiastically as you would have if you were the only person showing appreciation. Your contribution was real but diminished, knowing that the collective sound would carry the message even if your individual effort was modest. This is social loafing in its most innocent form. This phenomenon emerges because your brain is constantly calculating the minimum effort needed to achieve desired outcomes. In group settings, it recognizes that success doesn't depend entirely on your individual maximum effort, so it naturally conserves energy. This might have been adaptive for your ancestors, who needed to balance contributing to group efforts with preserving personal resources for individual survival. The effect becomes more pronounced as group size increases. In a two-person team, you know your contribution is highly visible and essential. In a 10-person team, you might unconsciously assume your reduced effort won't be noticed or won't significantly impact the outcome. Your motivation shifts from "I must do my best" to "I must do enough." Social loafing isn't necessarily problematic, sometimes it represents efficient resource allocation. If a group can accomplish its goals without every member working at maximum capacity, that creates space for individuals to rest, recharge, or focus their peak efforts on situations where they're most needed. Chapter 25: Group Mind Control. When you find yourself in a group, something subtle and powerful begins to happen. Your individual thoughts and feelings start to synchronize with those around you, like musicians unconsciously matching each other's tempo. This groupthink phenomenon can create beautiful harmony, but it can also lead entire groups of intelligent people to make decisions that none of them would have made alone. Your brain is wired for social connection, constantly reading the emotional and intellectual climate around you and adjusting itself to maintain harmony. When everyone in a meeting starts to lean toward a particular decision, you might find your own reservations fading, even if they were strong just moments before. This isn't weakness or lack of integrity, it's your social nervous system naturally seeking alignment with your tribe. Groupthink feels comfortable because it reduces the cognitive dissonance of disagreement. When you're surrounded by people who share your emerging opinion, doubt dissolves and confidence grows. The group's consensus becomes a warm blanket of validation, making alternative viewpoints seem not just wrong but almost unthinkable. Critical thinking gets overwhelmed by the desire for social harmony. This collective mind meld can produce remarkable outcomes when the group's initial direction is sound. Teams that think together often achieve insights and solutions that no individual member could have reached alone. The problem arises when the group's initial assumptions are flawed, because the same harmonizing process that enables breakthrough thinking can also amplify errors and blind spots. The most dangerous aspect of groupthink is how it creates an illusion of careful deliberation while actually narrowing the range of possibilities considered. Everyone feels like they've thought deeply about the decision, but they've really thought deeply within an increasingly narrow frame of reference. Chapter 26: Watching Others Suffer. One of the most puzzling aspects of human nature is how witnessing someone else's pain can sometimes bring a strange sense of relief or even subtle satisfaction. This Schadenfreude, taking pleasure in others' misfortunes, reveals something uncomfortable but profoundly human about how your mind manages its own struggles through comparison with others' difficulties. When you see someone who usually seems to have everything together facing a setback, part of you might feel a guilty sense of validation. It's not that you wish harm on others, but rather that their struggles make your own challenges feel more normal, more universal. Their imperfect moments remind you that everyone faces difficulties, which can be oddly comforting when you're dealing with your own. This response happens because your brain is constantly calibrating your place in the social world through comparison. When you see others succeeding while you're struggling, it can trigger feelings of inadequacy or self-doubt. But when you see others facing challenges similar to yours, it activates a different response, relief that you're not alone, that struggle is part of the human experience rather than evidence of personal failure. Sometimes this comparison brings genuine empathy and connection. Watching someone else navigate divorce, job loss, or health challenges can help you feel less isolated in your own difficulties. Their vulnerability reminds you that everyone carries hidden burdens, everyone faces setbacks, everyone is imperfect and struggling in some way. The shadow side emerges when this comparison becomes a primary source of self-esteem or when others' pain becomes entertainment. Healthy recognition of shared human struggle is different from finding pleasure in others' specific misfortunes. The first connects you to universal experiences, the second disconnects you from individual compassion. Chapter 27. Someone else will handle it. In moments when help is clearly needed, a curious thing can happen to your natural impulse to assist others. The more people who are present and could potentially help, the less likely you are to take action yourself. This diffusion of responsibility isn't callousness or laziness, it's your mind making logical calculations about necessity and social dynamics that sometimes lead to collectively inaction. When you're alone with someone who needs help, the responsibility is crystal clear, it's yours. Your mind doesn't waste time calculating who should respond because you're the only option available. But when others are present, your brain quickly assesses the situation and often concludes that surely someone more qualified, more available, or more obligated will step forward. This mental process happens lightning fast and mostly unconsciously. You might notice someone struggling with heavy packages while several people walk by, and find yourself thinking someone will help them rather than I should help them. The presence of others creates a psychological buffer that allows you to defer action to the collective group. The effect becomes stronger as the crowd grows larger and as the situation becomes more ambiguous. In clear emergencies with few witnesses, people often spring into heroic action. But in unclear situations with many potential helpers, everyone tends to wait for someone else to make the first move, creating a paradox where more available help leads to less actual help. This phenomenon also explains why specific requests for help are more effective than general appeals. When someone says, "Can anyone help me move this weekend?" the request disappears into diffused responsibility. But when they say, "Sarah, could you help me move this weekend?" the responsibility becomes focused and clear. Chapter 28. Following the crowd. Your mind has a built-in compass that constantly seeks magnetic north by looking at what others around you are doing, thinking, and believing. This social conformity isn't weakness or lack of originality, it's an ancient wisdom that recognizes the safety and efficiency of moving with the group rather than striking out alone into uncertain territory. Throughout human history, following the crowd often meant survival. If everyone in your tribe was running in the same direction, it was probably wise to run too rather than stopping to analyze why. If everyone was avoiding certain foods or places, conforming to that behavior likely kept you safe even if you never learned the specific reasons. Today, this conformity impulse shows up in countless small ways. You might find yourself walking at the same pace as people around you, speaking more quietly in quiet spaces, or dressing similarly to others in your workplace. These adjustments happen automatically as your social nervous system reads environmental cues and calibrates your behavior accordingly. Conformity can feel comforting because it reduces decision fatigue and social friction. When you're unsure how to behave in a new situation, following what others do provides a reliable template. When you're part of a group moving in the same direction, there's a sense of belonging and shared purpose that feels deeply satisfying. The shadow side of conformity emerges when the crowd is moving toward harmful or unwise choices, or when social pressure overrides your personal values and judgment. History is filled with examples of collective movements that seemed right to those within them but caused tremendous harm. The same mechanism that creates social cohesion can also enable collective delusion. The key is developing what might be called conscious conformity, choosing when to go with the flow and when to chart your own course. Sometimes following the crowd is efficient and appropriate. Chapter 29. Copying what others do. From your earliest moments of life, your brain has been equipped with sophisticated copying machinery that learns by watching and mimicking others. This social learning through imitation is so fundamental to human nature that you do it constantly without conscious thought, picking up everything from speech patterns to emotional expressions to problem-solving strategies simply by observing those around you. When you were a child, this mimicry was obviously essential. You learned to walk, talk, and navigate social situations by copying the models around you. But this same process continues throughout your adult life in subtle ways. You might find yourself unconsciously adopting the accent of someone you're talking with, or mimicking the body language of people you admire, or picking up new phrases from colleagues or friends. This social mirroring happens because your brain contains specialized neurons that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe others performing the same action. These mirror neurons create an automatic bridge between observation and imitation, making it natural for you to internally rehearse the behaviors you witness in others. The beautiful aspect of social learning is how efficiently it allows you to acquire new skills and adapt to different environments. Instead of having to figure out everything from scratch, you can benefit from others' experience and expertise. A new employee learns workplace culture not through formal training but by watching how successful colleagues behave. This copying mechanism also helps you connect emotionally with others. When you automatically mirror someone's posture or facial expression, you often begin to feel similar emotions, creating a foundation for empathy and emotional attunement. Your body teaches your mind how others might be feeling by literally copying their physical state. Chapter 30: Obeying Authority Blindly. Deep within your social programming lives a powerful tendency to defer to authority figures, even when their requests conflict with your personal judgment or values. This obedience to authority isn't simple submission, it's a complex response that recognizes legitimate power while sometimes overriding your individual moral compass, creating internal tensions that can be both necessary and troubling. Your brain has evolved sophisticated mechanisms for recognizing and responding to authority because hierarchical cooperation enabled human societies to function effectively. When legitimate leaders make decisions for the group, following those decisions often serves everyone's interests better than having each individual make separate choices. This recognition of authority helps create social order and collective action. But your obedience response can be triggered by symbols and contexts of authority even when the actual legitimacy is questionable. Uniforms, titles, institutional settings, and confident demeanor can activate your deference programming even when the person wearing these authority markers doesn't actually deserve your compliance. Your brain responds to the signals of authority more than to authority itself. The most famous psychological experiment on obedience revealed how ordinary people could be led to perform actions they would normally find morally objectionable when placed in situations that felt officially sanctioned. The participants weren't evil or weak, they were responding to powerful social programming that usually serves positive functions but can be manipulated in harmful ways. This tendency toward obedience creates an ongoing tension between social cooperation and individual responsibility. Following legitimate authority often makes sense and serves collective good. Chapter 31: Feeling Obligated to Return Favors. When someone does something kind for you, something automatic awakens in your mind, a gentle but persistent sense that you now owe them something in return. This reciprocity principle runs so deep in human nature that it feels almost like a law of physics. Acts of kindness create invisible debts that seek balance and resolution. This internal accounting system evolved because reciprocal relationships were essential for survival in human communities. When someone shared food with you during scarcity, helping them during their time of need created mutual support networks that benefited everyone. Your brain learned to track these social exchanges automatically, maintaining a running balance of who has helped whom. The reciprocity impulse can be beautiful when it creates genuine cycles of mutual care and support. You bring soup to a sick neighbor, they help you move furniture months later, you recommend them for a job opportunity, they introduce you to someone who becomes a close friend. These reciprocal spirals build the foundation of strong communities and lasting relationships. But this same psychological mechanism can be exploited by those who understand how it works. Someone might offer you an unexpected small favor, knowing that it creates a sense of obligation that can be leveraged later for a larger request. Your natural desire to reciprocate, which usually serves you well, can become a tool for manipulation when others use it strategically. The key insight is recognizing the difference between genuine reciprocity and manufactured obligation. True reciprocity flows naturally between people who care about each other's well-being. Manipulative reciprocity feels forced or disproportionate. Someone does a small favor for you and then immediately asks for something much larger in return. Chapter 32: The Small Request Trap. Your mind has a curious consistency principle. Once you've agreed to something small, you become much more likely to agree to something larger that's presented as a natural extension of your initial commitment. This foot-in-the-door technique works because your brain wants your actions to align with your self-image, creating a gentle trap that can lead you places you never intended to go. When you agree to a small request, perhaps signing a petition for a cause you support, you don't just perform an action, you also begin to see yourself as someone who supports that cause. This subtle shift in identity makes it psychologically easier to say yes when the same person later asks for a larger commitment, like volunteering time or donating money. This progression happens because your mind automatically works to maintain consistency between your self-concept and your actions. If you've already identified yourself as a supporter through your small action, refusing a larger request would create cognitive dissonance, an uncomfortable feeling that you're acting against your stated values. It's easier to say yes again than to deal with that internal conflict. The technique is so effective because the small initial request is usually genuinely reasonable and aligned with your actual values. You're not being tricked into doing something you completely oppose, you're being guided from mild support to active involvement through a series of logical seeming steps, each of which feels like a natural continuation of the previous one. This progression can lead to positive outcomes when you're being guided toward activities that genuinely serve your interests and values. Someone might start by asking you to attend one meeting, leading eventually to meaningful involvement in a cause you care about. The technique can facilitate authentic engagement and growth. Chapter 33: The Ridiculous Request Strategy. Sometimes people approach you with a request so large or unreasonable that you immediately say no, and then they follow up with a more moderate request that suddenly seems quite reasonable by comparison. This door-in-the-face technique works by making the second request feel like a compromise, even though it might still be larger than what you would have agreed to if it had been presented first. Your mind has a natural tendency to evaluate options in context rather than in absolute terms. When someone first asks you to volunteer for 20 hours a week, your immediate reaction is likely absolutely not. But when they then ask for just 2 hours a week, that second request feels modest and reasonable, even though 2 hours might still be more than you actually want to commit. This contrast effect happens automatically in your brain's comparison system. The large initial request becomes an anchor point that makes subsequent requests seem smaller than they actually are. It's like how a $50 shirt seems expensive until you see it next to a $200 shirt. Suddenly the $50 option looks like a bargain, even though its absolute price hasn't changed. The technique is particularly effective because it often makes you feel like you're getting a good deal or that the other person is being reasonable by reducing their request. You might even feel grateful that they're asking for only 2 hours instead of 20, forgetting that you might have preferred to give 0 hours if that initial anchor hadn't been set. This strategy can be used ethically when the final request represents genuine value for both parties and when the initial large request was a sincere starting point for negotiation. Many business and personal negotiations naturally involve this kind of anchoring and adjustment process, leading to mutually beneficial agreements. Chapter 34: Defining Yourself Through Groups. A significant part of who you think you are comes not from individual characteristics but from the groups you belong to, your family, profession, hometown, interests, beliefs, and countless other communities that provide you with identity and belonging. This social identity becomes so woven into your sense of self that threats to your groups can feel like personal attacks, and group successes can boost your self-esteem as if they were your own achievements. When you say "we won" after your favorite team's victory, even though you weren't on the field, you're revealing how deeply group identity integrates with personal identity. Your brain doesn't make sharp distinctions between individual and collective success. Achievements by your groups genuinely feel like your achievements because those groups are part of how you define yourself. This group identification serves important psychological functions. It provides belonging, purpose, shared meaning, and emotional support. When you face challenges as an individual, you can draw strength from knowing you're part of something larger than yourself. Your professional identity gives you a sense of competence and contribution. Your cultural background provides rich traditions and values to guide your choices. The shadow side emerges when group loyalty overrides individual judgment or when group identity becomes so important that you lose touch with your personal values and preferences. Sometimes you might find yourself defending positions you don't actually believe in simply because they're associated with your group, or making choices that serve group expectations rather than your authentic interests. Group identity can also create artificial divisions between us and them that lead to prejudice and conflict. Chapter 35: Favoring Your Own Kind. Your brain has a built-in preference system that automatically favors people who seem similar to you, whether through shared backgrounds, interests, appearance, or values. This in-group favoritism happens so quickly and naturally that you might not even notice how it influences your judgments, choices, and behaviors in countless small ways throughout each day. This preferential treatment isn't necessarily conscious prejudice. It often manifests as subtle warmth toward people who remind you of yourself or your communities. You might find yourself more patient with someone who shares your accent, more trusting of someone who went to your school, or more interested in helping someone who shares your hobbies or values. From an evolutionary perspective, this favoritism made sense when human survival depended on tight-knit groups that competed with other groups for limited resources. Preferring your tribe members over outsiders helped ensure group cohesion and mutual support when cooperation could mean the difference between thriving and perishing. Today, this same mechanism can create positive connections and communities. Shared identity and background often do predict compatibility and mutual understanding. People with similar experiences may genuinely have more in common and be better able to support each other effectively. Professional networks, hobby groups, and cultural communities all benefit from this natural affinity between similar people. The challenge arises when in-group favoritism becomes so automatic that it prevents you from recognizing the value and humanity in people who seem different from you. When preference for similarity turns into discomfort with difference, opportunities for growth, learning, and meaningful relationships can be lost. The most problematic outcomes occur when in-group favoritism translates into unfair advantages in important areas like hiring, lending, housing, or legal treatment. Chapter 36: Seeing Others as All the Same. When you encounter people from groups you're less familiar with, your mind tends to focus on the characteristics they share rather than their individual differences. This outgroup homogeneity effect means you see more diversity within groups you belong to while perceiving less diversity within groups you don't belong to, even when the actual variety within both groups is similar. Think about how you view your own profession, hobby group, or family. You probably see tremendous diversity, different personalities, skills, opinions, and approaches among people who might seem quite similar to outsiders. But when you consider people in unfamiliar professions or cultures, they might seem more uniform, as if they all think and act in similar ways. This perceptual difference happens because you have much more detailed information about people in your own groups. You know their individual quirks, personal histories, internal conflicts, and unique perspectives. But for people in other groups, you often only see the surface characteristics that make them identifiable as group members, their uniform, their cultural markers, or their shared beliefs. Your brain's pattern recognition system, trying to be efficient with limited information, focuses on the features that distinguish one group from another rather than the features that distinguish individuals within each group. It's like viewing a forest from far away. You see the general shape and color of the tree-covered hill, but only when you walk among the trees do you notice how different each one actually is. This tendency can lead to stereotyping and oversimplified judgments about people from unfamiliar groups. When you assume that all members of another culture, profession, or community share the same attitudes and behaviors, you miss the rich individual variations that actually exist within every human group. Chapter 37: Fear of Confirming Stereotypes. When you're aware that others might judge your entire group based on your individual performance, a subtle pressure can arise that affects how you think, feel, and behave. This stereotype threat creates an invisible burden where you're not just trying to do well for yourself, but also trying to avoid confirming negative assumptions that others might hold about people like you. This phenomenon can show up in countless situations: a woman in a math class worried about reinforcing ideas about gender and mathematical ability, an older person learning new technology concerned about seeming out of touch, or anyone from an underrepresented group feeling extra pressure to excel in professional settings where few people share their background. The cruel irony of stereotype threat is that the anxiety about confirming negative stereotypes can actually impair performance, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. When part of your mental energy is occupied with worrying about how your actions will be interpreted, less cognitive resources are available for the actual task at hand. The fear of failing can contribute to the very failure you're trying to avoid. This pressure is emotionally exhausting because it means you can never just be yourself. You feel responsible for representing your entire group positively. One mistake doesn't feel like a personal setback, it feels like letting down everyone who shares your identity. Success brings relief rather than pure joy because it means you've avoided reinforcing harmful assumptions. The weight of stereotype threat reveals how individual psychology intersects with broader social dynamics. Your personal performance carries meaning beyond your individual circumstances because of the context of prejudice and limited representation that surrounds you. This isn't fair, but recognizing it can help you understand some of the invisible challenges that people face. Chapter 38: Reducing Prejudice Through Contact. One of the most hopeful discoveries in social psychology is how naturally prejudice tends to diminish when people from different groups interact as equals in cooperative situations. This contact hypothesis suggests that many biases and stereotypes are maintained primarily by separation and ignorance, and can be reduced through genuine human connection and shared experiences. When you work alongside someone from a different background toward common goals, something beautiful happens in your mind. The abstract category that person represented begins to dissolve, replaced by a specific individual with their own personality, skills, sense of humor, and human complexity. It becomes much harder to maintain negative stereotypes about their group when you know them as a unique person. This transformation works best when the contact happens between people of equal status working toward shared objectives. Simply being in the same space isn't enough, the interaction needs to involve genuine cooperation and mutual respect. When people contribute equally to achieving something they all care about, group boundaries become less important than individual contributions and relationships. Successful contact experiences create what psychologists call cross-categorization. Instead of seeing someone primarily through the lens of their group membership, you begin to see them through multiple, intersecting identities. They're not just someone from that other group but also the person who's really good at problem solving or my colleague who always makes me laugh. The effects of positive contact often generalize beyond the specific individuals involved. When you develop a friendship with someone from an initially unfamiliar group, your attitudes toward that entire group typically become more positive. One genuine relationship can undo years of abstract prejudice and stereotyping. Chapter 39: Training Your Brain Like Pavlov's Dogs. Your brain is constantly learning associations between different experiences, linking events that occur together in time until one automatically triggers thoughts or feelings about the other. This classical conditioning, made famous by Pavlov's experiments with dogs and bells, shapes your daily life in countless subtle ways, creating automatic responses that bypass conscious thought. Think about how your body responds to your alarm clock. The sound itself isn't inherently stressful, but because it's been paired with the need to wake up and start your day, your nervous system now reacts to that particular tone with immediate alertness and perhaps a touch of anxiety. Your brain has learned to associate that sound with time to get moving. These learned associations can be wonderfully helpful. The smell of your favorite coffee might automatically lift your mood because it's been paired with pleasant morning moments. Hearing a certain song might instantly transport you to happy memories because your brain linked that music with positive experiences. Your mind's associative learning creates shortcuts to desired emotional states. But conditioning can also create unhelpful automatic responses. If you've had stressful experiences in certain situations, perhaps public speaking or medical appointments, your nervous system might activate anxiety responses as soon as you encounter similar contexts, even when the current situation is actually safe and positive. The beautiful thing about understanding classical conditioning is recognizing that these associations were learned, which means they can be unlearned or modified. Your brain's plasticity means new experiences can gradually override old associations. The smell that once triggered unpleasant memories can be reconditioned through new positive experiences in similar contexts. You can also use this knowledge intentionally to create helpful associations. Chapter 40: Rewards and Punishments. Your behavior is constantly being shaped by the consequences that follow your actions. This operant conditioning works like an invisible sculptor, gradually molding your habits and choices through the rewards and punishments that result from what you do. Your brain pays close attention to these outcomes, strengthening behaviors that lead to positive results and weakening those that lead to negative ones. When you receive praise for a job well done, your mind registers this positive consequence and becomes more likely to repeat whatever actions led to that recognition. When you experience negative outcomes from certain choices, your brain files away those associations and steers you away from similar decisions in the future. This learning happens largely below conscious awareness, shaping your behavior through accumulated experience. The most powerful rewards aren't always external. Your internal sense of satisfaction, accomplishment, or relief can be even more influential than praise or prizes from others. When you complete a challenging task and feel that inner glow of achievement, your brain strengthens the neural pathways that led to that positive feeling, making you more likely to tackle similar challenges in the future. Similarly, internal punishments like guilt, anxiety, or disappointment can powerfully shape your behavior even when no external consequences exist. Your conscience acts as an internal guidance system, creating emotional consequences that train your behavior according to your values and social conditioning. The timing of consequences matters tremendously. Immediate rewards or punishments have much more impact on your behavior than delayed ones, even when the delayed consequences are more significant. This explains why it can be hard to maintain healthy habits that have long-term benefits but immediate costs, or to avoid unhealthy behaviors that feel good now but cause problems later. Chapter 41: The Power of Positive Feedback. When you receive recognition, appreciation, or positive feedback for something you've done, your brain doesn't just process this as pleasant information, it creates a neurological reward experience that literally makes you want to repeat the behavior that earned that positive response. This positive reinforcement is one of the most powerful tools for shaping human behavior, creating upward spirals of motivation and improvement. Your mind is designed to seek out experiences that generate positive feelings, and social recognition taps into some of your deepest psychological needs. When someone acknowledges your efforts, skills, or contributions, it satisfies your fundamental desire to matter, to be seen, to make a difference. This satisfaction creates a natural motivation to continue or expand the behaviors that earn such recognition. The beautiful thing about positive reinforcement is how it tends to create virtuous cycles. When you receive appreciation for being helpful, you're more likely to help again. When your creativity is celebrated, you're more likely to take creative risks. When your kindness is acknowledged, you naturally want to be kind more often. Each positive response strengthens the neural pathways associated with positive behaviors. Positive feedback works better than criticism for learning and growth because it creates a psychologically safe environment where you're willing to take risks and try new approaches. When you know that effort and progress will be recognized even if the results aren't perfect, you're more likely to stretch beyond your comfort zone and develop new capabilities. The timing and specificity of positive feedback affects its power. Immediate, specific recognition. I really appreciated how you listened carefully to everyone's concerns in that meeting, has more impact than delayed, general praise. Chapter 42. Removing bad things to feel good. Sometimes the most powerful reward isn't gaining something pleasant, but rather escaping or avoiding something unpleasant. This negative reinforcement works by strengthening behaviors that make uncomfortable experiences go away, creating powerful learning that can shape your actions in both helpful and problematic ways. Think about how you feel when a headache finally stops after taking medicine, or when you finally complete a task that's been causing you stress. The relief that comes from removing discomfort can be just as reinforcing as receiving something positive. Your brain learns to repeat whatever actions led to that blessed relief from negative experiences. This type of learning explains many daily behaviors that might otherwise seem puzzling. You might procrastinate on important tasks not because you enjoy wasting time, but because avoiding the task temporarily removes the anxiety associated with it. The immediate relief reinforces the avoidance behavior, even though it creates more stress in the long run. Negative reinforcement can create healthy patterns too. When you establish a regular exercise routine, you might initially be motivated by avoiding the sluggish feeling that comes from inactivity. When you maintain good relationships, you might partly be motivated by avoiding the loneliness that comes from isolation. Removing negative experiences can be a powerful motivator for positive behaviors. The challenge with negative reinforcement is that it can sometimes trap you in cycles where you're constantly trying to escape discomfort rather than moving toward positive goals. Instead of being motivated by what you want to gain, you become motivated primarily by what you want to avoid. This can create a defensive rather than growth-oriented approach to life. Understanding negative reinforcement can help you recognize when avoidance behaviors are serving you and when they might be limiting you. Chapter 43. Why Gambling is So Addictive. The most powerful way to strengthen a behavior isn't to reward it every single time, but rather to reward it unpredictably, creating what psychologists call a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement. This intermittent reward pattern is why gambling can become so compelling. Your brain never knows when the next reward will come, so it keeps trying, hoping that this next attempt will be the lucky one. When rewards come at predictable intervals, your brain eventually learns the pattern and motivation tends to decrease between rewards. But when rewards come randomly, sometimes after 2 attempts, sometimes after 20, your mind stays engaged and hopeful throughout the entire process. Each unrewarded attempt feels like it's bringing you closer to the next reward, even though this logic isn't actually valid. This same reinforcement schedule explains why social media can be so captivating. You never know when you'll get a like, comment, or message that gives you that small hit of social reward. Your brain keeps checking, scrolling, refreshing, hoping that this time there will be something exciting waiting for you. The unpredictability maintains your engagement far longer than if notifications came at regular, predictable intervals. Variable ratio reinforcement creates what researchers call extinction resistance. Behaviors learned on this schedule are incredibly persistent and hard to eliminate. Even when rewards stop coming entirely, people often continue the behavior for a long time, convinced that the next attempt will surely bring the reward they're seeking. This pattern can trap people in cycles where they continue behaviors that are no longer serving them, simply because those behaviors were intermittently rewarded in the past. The occasional positive outcome feels so validating that it justifies continuing despite frequent disappointments and negative consequences. Chapter 44. Predictable Reward Patterns. When rewards come at regular, predictable intervals, your behavior follows a fascinating pattern. You work steadily toward the reward as it approaches, then often take a break immediately after receiving it before beginning to build momentum again. This fixed interval schedule creates a natural rhythm of effort and rest that mirrors many aspects of your daily life. Think about how your motivation changes throughout a typical work week. You might start Monday with relatively low energy, gradually building momentum through Tuesday and Wednesday, reaching peak effort by Thursday and Friday as the weekend approaches. Then Saturday arrives and your work motivation naturally drops to nearly zero, before slowly beginning to rebuild for the following week. This same pattern appears in many other contexts. Students often show increased study behavior as exams approach, then decreased academic effort immediately after tests are completed. People tend to work harder on projects as deadlines near, then experience a natural dip in motivation once the project is finished. Your brain has learned to calibrate effort based on the timing of expected rewards. The predictability of fixed-interval reinforcement has both advantages and disadvantages. On the positive side, it creates sustainable rhythms that prevent burnout and allow for recovery periods. Your mind and body benefit from having predictable cycles of effort and rest, work and recovery, engagement and restoration. On the potential downside, fixed-interval schedules can sometimes lead to procrastination early in the cycle when the reward feels distant, followed by stress and rushed effort as the deadline approaches. This pattern can create unnecessary pressure and reduce the quality of work or experience during crunch periods. Understanding this natural rhythm can help you work with your motivational patterns rather than against them. Chapter 45: Random Reward Timing. When rewards come at unpredictable intervals rather than regular ones, something fascinating happens to your behavior. You maintain steady, consistent effort over long periods without the peaks and valleys that characterize predictable reward schedules. This variable interval reinforcement creates what might be the most stable and persistent patterns of behavior in human psychology. Imagine checking your email throughout the day. You never know exactly when something interesting will arrive. Sometimes you get important messages within minutes of your last check, sometimes hours pass with nothing significant. This unpredictability keeps you checking regularly and consistently, without the dramatic changes in effort that would occur if emails arrived at precisely scheduled times. This reinforcement pattern is different from the variable ratio schedule that makes gambling so compelling. Instead of being about how many actions you need to take to get rewarded, it's about how much time passes before rewards become available. Your behavior becomes steady and patient rather than frantically hopeful. Variable interval schedules create what researchers consider the most realistic form of reinforcement because they mirror how rewards actually work in many real-life situations. Friendships, career advancement, creative breakthroughs, and personal growth all tend to follow unpredictable timelines that require consistent effort without guaranteed short-term payoffs. This type of reinforcement builds what might be called psychological endurance, the ability to maintain positive behaviors even when rewards are delayed or uncertain. People who succeed in long-term endeavors often demonstrate this capacity to persist through periods where their efforts don't seem to be paying off immediately. The beautiful aspect of variable interval conditioning is how it develops patience and resilience. Chapter 46: Gradually Changing Behavior. One of the most elegant ways to create lasting behavioral change is through a process called shaping, where you gradually guide behavior in the desired direction by reinforcing small improvements rather than waiting for perfect performance. This gentle approach works with your brain's natural learning patterns rather than against them, creating sustainable change without overwhelming your system. Think about how you might teach a child to clean their room. Instead of expecting immediate perfection and only praising when everything is spotless, you might start by celebrating when they put away just their toys, then gradually raising the standard to include clothes, then books, then making the bed. Each step builds on the previous one, creating momentum toward the final goal. This incremental approach works because your brain finds small changes much less threatening than dramatic transformations. When you try to change too much too quickly, your nervous system often activates resistance, making it harder to maintain new behaviors. But when changes feel manageable and are reinforced at each step, your mind gradually adapts without triggering defensive responses. Shaping is particularly effective for complex behaviors that can't be learned all at once. Learning to play a musical instrument, developing better communication skills, or establishing exercise habits all benefit from this gradual approach. Each small improvement deserves recognition and reinforcement, creating positive momentum toward larger goals. The key to successful shaping is setting your criteria thoughtfully, high enough to encourage growth, but not so high that progress feels impossible. If you're trying to establish a meditation practice, you might start by reinforcing yourself for sitting quietly for just 2 minutes, then gradually increasing the duration as the habit becomes more established. Chapter 47: When Good Habits Disappear. Even the strongest habits can sometimes fade away when the conditions that supported them change or when they stop being reinforced. This extinction process can be frustrating when positive behaviors you've worked hard to establish suddenly seem to disappear, but understanding how it works can help you prevent habit loss or rebuild behaviors that have weakened over time. Habits are maintained by the rewards they produce, whether those rewards are internal satisfaction, external recognition, or practical benefits. When those reinforcing outcomes stop occurring or become less noticeable, even well-established behaviors can begin to weaken. It's like a path through the woods that becomes overgrown when people stop walking on it regularly. Sometimes extinction happens gradually and almost imperceptibly. You might have a strong exercise routine that slowly fades as your schedule changes, the weather gets colder, or your workout buddy moves away. Each individual day of not exercising seems unimportant, but collectively they weaken the neural pathways that supported your fitness habit. Other times extinction can happen more suddenly when major life changes disrupt the environmental cues and reward systems that maintained your positive behaviors. Moving to a new city, starting a new job, or experiencing a significant life event can interrupt even the strongest habits by changing the context in which they occurred. The important thing to understand is that extinction doesn't erase the learning that created your habits in the first place. The neural pathways become weaker and less active, but they don't disappear completely. This is why it's often easier to re-establish a habit you once had than to build a completely new one from scratch. You can prevent extinction by consciously maintaining the reward systems that support your positive habits. Chapter 48: Old Habits Coming Back. Just when you think you've successfully eliminated an unwanted habit, it can sometimes resurface unexpectedly, especially during times of stress, fatigue, or emotional vulnerability. This spontaneous recovery reveals that old behavioral patterns never completely disappear from your brain, they simply become dormant, waiting for the right conditions to reactivate. This can be discouraging when you've worked hard to change problematic behaviors only to find yourself falling back into familiar patterns during challenging times. But understanding spontaneous recovery can actually help you prepare for and manage these temporary setbacks without interpreting them as complete failure or loss of progress. Your brain maintains multiple behavioral programs simultaneously, like having several different routes to the same destination stored in your mental GPS. When your primary route becomes blocked or when you're operating under stress, your mind might automatically default to older, more familiar pathways, even if they're not the ones you prefer to use. This tendency is particularly strong during times when your cognitive resources are depleted. When you're tired, overwhelmed, or emotionally activated, your brain tends to rely on well-established automatic responses rather than newer, more effortful behavioral patterns. It's like reverting to your native language when you're exhausted, even if you've become fluent in a second language. The return of old habits doesn't mean your new learning was ineffective or that you're back to square one. It simply means that stress or challenging circumstances temporarily activated older neural pathways. Once you recognize what's happening, you can usually re-engage your newer, more preferred behavioral patterns. Chapter 49: Seeing Patterns Everywhere. Your brain is an extraordinary pattern detection machine, constantly searching for similarities between new experiences and familiar ones. This stimulus generalization helps you navigate the world efficiently by applying previous learning to novel situations, but it can sometimes lead you to see connections and patterns that don't actually exist, or to respond to new situations as if they were identical to past experiences. When you learn to be cautious around one aggressive dog, your mind naturally extends that caution to other dogs that share similar characteristics, size, breed, or behavior patterns. This generalization can be life-saving, helping you recognize and avoid potential dangers based on previous experience. Your brain assumes that things which look or feel similar are likely to behave similarly. This same process helps you transfer skills and knowledge across different contexts. Learning to drive one car helps you drive others, even though each vehicle has slightly different controls and handling. Understanding one romantic relationship gives you insights that can improve future relationships. Your mind constantly looks for ways to apply existing knowledge to new challenges. But generalization can sometimes be too broad, leading you to respond to safe situations as if they were dangerous, or to assume that all people who remind you of someone from your past will behave the same way. A negative experience with one authority figure might make you nervous around all authority figures, even when the new person has completely different intentions and character. This pattern-seeking tendency also explains why you might see meaningful connections in random events, interpret coincidences as signs, or assume that past patterns will continue indefinitely into the future. Your brain is so good at finding patterns that it sometimes finds them even in purely random data. Chapter 50: Learning to Tell Things Apart. While your brain naturally seeks patterns and similarities, it's equally skilled at learning to distinguish between things that initially seemed alike. This discrimination learning helps you develop increasingly sophisticated responses to subtle differences in your environment, allowing you to respond appropriately to the nuanced variations that make each situation unique. Think about how you've learned to distinguish between different people's emotions. At first, you might have only recognized basic categories like happy or sad. But over time, you've developed the ability to discriminate between dozens of emotional states, the difference between contentment and joy, between frustration and anger, between nervousness and excitement. Each distinction helps you respond more appropriately to others' needs and feelings. This same discrimination process happens in every area of learning. Musicians learn to hear subtle differences in pitch and timing that escape untrained ears. Wine enthusiasts develop the ability to detect flavor notes that would be completely unnoticeable to casual drinkers. Professionals in any field gradually learn to make distinctions that seem impossible to beginners. Discrimination learning often requires practice and feedback. You need to experience many examples of slightly different situations and receive information about which responses work best in each case. Over time, your brain fine-tunes its categorization system, creating more and more specific guidelines for when to apply different approaches. This process can be particularly important in social and emotional situations. Learning to discriminate between people who are similar in some ways but different in others helps you avoid overgeneralization. Not everyone who reminds you of a difficult person from your past will be difficult themselves. Not every situation that feels familiar will have the same outcome as previous similar situations. Chapter 51: Copying What You See. From your earliest days, your brain has been equipped with remarkable observational learning abilities that allow you to acquire new behaviors simply by watching others. This modeling process doesn't require you to personally experience every consequence or go through trial and error learning. You can benefit from observing what works and what doesn't work for other people. When you watch someone successfully parallel park a car, solve a conflict diplomatically, or handle a challenging situation with grace, your mind is taking detailed notes. You're not just observing their actions, you're learning the sequence of behaviors, the timing, the context clues that make their approach successful. This information gets stored for potential future use. Observational learning is incredibly efficient because it allows you to skip the costly mistakes that come with pure trial and error approaches. Instead of having to personally experience every failure and setback, you can learn from others' experiences, adopting their successful strategies while avoiding their unsuccessful ones. This process works best when you observe people who are skilled in areas you want to develop, share similar circumstances to your own, or demonstrate approaches that align with your values and goals. The most effective models are those whose success you can realistically emulate given your current resources and situation. Your brain naturally pays closer attention to models who seem credible and competent. When you watch someone who appears confident and successful in their approach, you're more likely to encode their behaviors as worth copying. This is why mentorship and exposure to skilled practitioners in any field can be so transformative. However, observational learning isn't passive absorption. Your mind is actively filtering what you observe, considering how these behaviors might work in your specific context. Chapter 52, Monkey See, Monkey Do. Deep within your brain lies a sophisticated network of mirror neurons that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing the same action. This remarkable system creates an automatic bridge between observation and imitation, making social learning feel as natural and immediate as your own direct experience. When you watch someone smile, reach for an object, or express emotion, your mirror neurons activate as if you were performing those same actions yourself. This neural mirroring provides the foundation for empathy, social connection, and the rapid acquisition of new behaviors through simple observation. It's your brain's way of creating shared experiences with others. This mirroring happens so automatically that you might not even notice it occurring. You might find yourself unconsciously mimicking the posture of someone you're talking with, adopting the speech patterns of people you spend time with, or feeling echoes of emotions you observe in others. Your brain is constantly creating subtle connections through this neural resonance. The mirror neuron system helps explain why watching skilled performers can be almost as valuable as practicing yourself. When you observe an expert musician, athlete, or craftsperson, your brain is internally rehearsing their movements and strategies. This mental practice creates neural pathways that make it easier to perform similar actions when you try them yourself. This same system contributes to emotional contagion, the way moods and feelings can spread through groups of people. When you're around someone who's anxious, excited, or calm, your mirror neurons help you literally feel echoes of their emotional state, creating the foundation for emotional empathy and social bonding. Mirror neurons also play a crucial role in understanding others' intentions and motivations. Chapter 53, Believing in Your Abilities. Your beliefs about your own capabilities have profound effects on your actual performance, creating what psychologists call self-efficacy, the confidence that you can successfully execute the behaviors necessary to produce specific outcomes. This belief in your abilities becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, influencing not just how well you perform, but whether you attempt challenging tasks in the first place. When you believe you can accomplish something, you approach it with greater energy, persistence, and creativity. You're more likely to set ambitious goals, more willing to persist through obstacles, and more effective at using your existing skills and resources. Your confidence becomes a performance enhancer that helps you access more of your actual potential. Conversely, when you doubt your abilities, you often underperform relative to your actual capabilities. Self-doubt creates anxiety that interferes with concentration, leads to premature giving up when challenges arise, and prevents you from fully engaging your problem-solving resources. You might possess the skills needed for success but be limited by your beliefs about those skills. Self-efficacy develops through four main sources: your own past successes and failures, observing others similar to yourself succeed or fail, encouragement or discouragement from others, and your interpretation of your physical and emotional states during performance. Each of these sources contributes to your overall sense of competence and capability. The most powerful source is your own mastery experiences, times when you successfully accomplish something challenging. These experiences create robust confidence because they provide direct evidence of your capabilities. Even small successes can build self-efficacy when you recognize them as demonstrations of your growing competence. Chapter 54, The Habit Loop. Every habit in your life follows a simple but powerful three-part pattern: a cue that triggers the behavior, the routine behavior itself, and a reward that reinforces the entire sequence. Understanding this habit loop can help you build positive habits more effectively and change problematic ones by identifying and modifying the components that drive automatic behaviors. The cue is whatever signals your brain that it's time to engage in a particular habit. It might be a specific time of day, an emotional state, a physical location, the presence of certain people, or the completion of another activity. Your brain learns to recognize these environmental triggers and automatically activates the associated behavioral routine. The routine is the behavior itself, the actions you take when the cue appears. This might be brushing your teeth, checking your phone, going for a run, having a snack, or any other repeated behavior. Once triggered by the cue, the routine often happens with minimal conscious thought, running on autopilot through your established neural pathways. The reward is whatever benefit you gain from completing the routine: physical satisfaction, emotional relief, social connection, a sense of accomplishment, or simply the comfort of completing a familiar pattern. This reward teaches your brain that the entire sequence is worth remembering and repeating in the future. Over time, this loop becomes so automatic that the cue alone can trigger cravings for the reward, even before you've performed the routine. Your brain anticipates the satisfaction that comes from completing the habit, creating motivation to engage in the behavior whenever the trigger appears. To build new positive habits, you can consciously design habit loops by choosing consistent cues, defining clear routines, and ensuring meaningful rewards. Chapter 55: Why Beautiful People Seem Perfect. Your mind has a curious tendency to assume that attractive people possess other positive qualities that have nothing to do with their physical appearance. This halo effect means that beauty acts like a gentle spotlight that makes everything else about a person seem more appealing, creating an impression of overall perfection that goes far beyond what you can actually observe. When you encounter someone who's physically attractive, your brain automatically assumes they're also more intelligent, kind, successful, and talented than less attractive people. This happens so quickly and unconsciously that you might not even realize you're making these additional positive assumptions based solely on physical appearance. This mental shortcut probably evolved because physical health and attractiveness were once reliable indicators of genetic fitness and survival capability. Your ancestors who could quickly identify healthy potential partners and allies had advantages in both reproduction and cooperation. Modern attractiveness standards, however, don't necessarily correlate with the qualities your brain assumes they represent. The halo effect extends beyond physical attractiveness to other positive characteristics. If you know someone is successful in business, you might automatically assume they're also good at relationships, skilled at parenting, or wise about investments. One positive trait creates a glow that makes all other traits seem more positive, even when there's no logical connection. This tendency can lead to disappointment when attractive or successful people turn out to be as complex and flawed as everyone else. The pedestal your mind automatically constructs can make normal human imperfection seem more shocking and disappointing than they would be in someone you hadn't idealized. Chapter 56: When One Bad Thing Ruins Everything. Sometimes a single negative experience can cast a shadow over everything else, making an otherwise good day, relationship, or situation feel completely ruined. This negativity bias means that bad events carry disproportionate psychological weight compared to good ones, requiring multiple positive experiences to balance out the impact of one negative incident. Your brain evolved to pay special attention to negative events because they often signal danger or threats that required immediate attention. While positive experiences were pleasant, negative ones could be matters of survival. This ancient programming still operates today, making criticism sting longer than praise, making losses feel worse than equivalent gains feel good. This bias shows up in countless ways throughout your daily life. One critical comment in an otherwise supportive performance review can dominate your thoughts for days. One rude interaction can spoil the memory of an otherwise lovely evening. One small failure can make you question your abilities despite numerous previous successes. The tendency becomes particularly strong when the negative event conflicts with your positive expectations or self-image. When something goes wrong in an area where you usually succeed, or when someone you care about disappoints you, the contrast makes the negative experience feel especially significant and meaningful. Understanding negativity bias doesn't mean dismissing the importance of negative feedback or experiences. Sometimes they contain valuable information that deserves attention. The key is recognizing when your brain is amplifying negative events beyond their actual significance, preventing you from maintaining perspective on the overall pattern of your experiences. Chapter 57: Seeing Only What Confirms Your Beliefs. Your mind has a subtle but powerful tendency to seek out, notice, and remember information that supports what you already believe while overlooking or dismissing evidence that challenges your existing views. This confirmation bias acts like a mental filter that creates the illusion that your beliefs are more accurate and well supported than they might actually be. When you hold a strong opinion about politics, relationships, health, or any other topic, you naturally pay more attention to news stories, conversations, and experiences that confirm your perspective. Information that supports your views feels relevant and important, while contradictory information might seem biased, irrelevant, or simply less noticeable. This selective attention happens automatically and often unconsciously. You might read the same news article as someone with different beliefs and come away with completely different impressions about what it said and what it meant. Your brain highlights the parts that fit your existing framework while minimizing the parts that don't fit as neatly. Confirmation bias serves psychological functions by protecting your sense of being right and reducing the cognitive discomfort that comes from encountering conflicting information. It takes mental energy to seriously consider ideas that challenge your beliefs, and your brain naturally tries to conserve that energy whenever possible. The tendency becomes stronger when beliefs are tied to your identity or values. If you see yourself as a rational person, you might unconsciously resist evidence that suggests you've been wrong about something important. If your beliefs connect you to valued social groups, questioning those beliefs can feel like threatening your belonging and relationships. Chapter 58: Fighting Facts That Prove You Wrong. When you encounter information that directly contradicts your deeply held beliefs, something interesting often happens in your mind. Instead of changing your beliefs to match the new evidence, you might find yourself working harder to defend your original position. This motivated reasoning allows you to maintain psychological comfort by finding ways to discount, reinterpret, or rationalize away challenging information. Your brain becomes remarkably creative when protecting cherished beliefs. You might question the credibility of sources that present inconvenient facts, find alternative explanations that preserve your original views, or focus on small flaws in the evidence while ignoring its overall strength. This isn't conscious dishonesty, it's your mind automatically working to reduce the discomfort of cognitive dissonance. This defensive response is strongest when beliefs are closely tied to your identity, values, or important relationships. If changing your mind about something would require admitting you were wrong about something important, acknowledging that people you trust were mistaken, or distancing yourself from valued social groups, your brain works overtime to find reasons not to change. The process can be so smooth and automatic that you don't even realize it's happening. You might genuinely believe you're being objective and rational while unconsciously filtering information through a lens that protects your existing worldview. The motivated reasoning feels like careful analysis, but it's actually working backward from your desired conclusion. Sometimes this defensive response can escalate when confronted with strong contradictory evidence, leading to even stronger conviction in your original beliefs. The psychological threat of being proven wrong triggers more aggressive rationalization, making you more certain than ever that your initial position was correct. Chapter 59: Living with Contradictory Thoughts. Your mind has a remarkable capacity to hold multiple conflicting ideas, feelings, or beliefs simultaneously, even when they seem logically incompatible. This cognitive dissonance can feel uncomfortable, like an internal argument that never quite resolves, but it's also a sign of your brain's sophisticated ability to navigate the complexity and ambiguity that characterize real life. You might simultaneously love someone and feel frustrated with them, want to succeed professionally while also valuing work-life balance, believe in being environmentally responsible while still driving a car or flying on airplanes. These contradictions aren't character flaws or logical failures, they are natural responses to a world where most important issues involve competing values and trade-offs. When contradictory thoughts create too much internal tension, your mind has several ways of managing the discomfort. Sometimes you rationalize the contradiction by finding ways to make the conflicting ideas seem compatible. Other times you might compartmentalize, keeping contradictory beliefs separate by applying them in different contexts or situations. The discomfort of cognitive dissonance often serves as a motivation for change, growth, or deeper thinking. When your actions don't align with your values, the internal tension can inspire you to either modify your behavior or reconsider your values. When new experiences challenge your existing beliefs, the resulting discomfort can lead to expanded understanding. Some people have higher tolerance for ambiguity and contradiction than others, feeling relatively comfortable with the messiness and complexity of holding multiple perspectives simultaneously. Others prefer clearer, more consistent worldviews and work actively to resolve contradictions whenever they notice them. Both approaches have advantages and disadvantages. Chapter 60: Not Noticing Your Own Choices. Many of your daily decisions happen so automatically that you barely notice you're making them, creating what psychologists call choice blindness, a fascinating inability to detect when your preferences change or when you've been given different options than what you thought you selected. This reveals how much of your decision-making occurs below the threshold of conscious awareness. In studies where people choose between photographs, products, or options and are then secretly given different items than what they selected, many participants not only fail to notice the switch but confidently explain why they made the choice they never actually made. Their brains construct reasonable explanations for decisions they didn't make, revealing how much of your sense of choice is reconstructed after the fact. This happens because many choices operate more like mental shortcuts than careful deliberations. Your brain rapidly processes available options, applies automatic preferences and biases, and arrives at decisions that feel intentional even when they're largely driven by unconscious factors like recent experiences, environmental cues, or emotional states you're not even aware of. Your sense of having carefully chosen something can be surprisingly fragile. When asked to explain your preferences, you might discover that your reasons are less clear or compelling than you expected. The choice that felt obvious and well-reasoned in the moment might seem arbitrary or puzzling when you try to articulate why you made it. This choice blindness extends to bigger life decisions too. You might believe you chose your career, relationship, or lifestyle through careful consideration, but closer examination might reveal how much those choices were influenced by circumstances, social expectations, or unconscious preferences that you weren't fully aware of at the time. Chapter 61: Paralyzed by Too Many Options. When faced with an abundance of choices, your mind can sometimes become overwhelmed to the point where decision-making becomes difficult or even impossible. This choice overload or paradox of choice can transform what should feel like freedom and opportunity into stress and paralysis, making even simple decisions feel burdensome and complex. Think about standing in front of a wall of breakfast cereals at the grocery store, scrolling through hundreds of movies on a streaming service, or trying to choose a restaurant in a city with thousands of options. Instead of feeling excited by all the possibilities, you might find yourself feeling anxious, overwhelmed, or unable to decide at all. This happens because your brain has limited processing capacity for evaluating options. When there are just a few choices, you can relatively easily compare their merits and make a decision. But as options multiply, the cognitive load of comparison increases exponentially, eventually exceeding your mental resources and leading to decision fatigue. Too many choices can also raise your standards unrealistically high, creating the fear that whatever you choose won't be the absolute best option available. With unlimited possibilities, the perfect choice feels like it must exist somewhere, making any actual choice feel like settling or failing to optimize properly. The abundance of options can also increase regret after decisions are made. When there were only a few alternatives, it's easier to feel satisfied with your choice. But when you know hundreds of options existed, it's easier to imagine that one of the unchosen alternatives might have been better, leading to buyer's remorse or choice regret. Interestingly, people often report being less satisfied with their decisions when they had more options to choose from, even when objectively their choice was perfectly good. Chapter 62: Hating to Lose More Than Loving to Win. Deep in your psychological wiring lies an asymmetry that affects countless decisions. The pain of losing something feels roughly twice as intense as the pleasure of gaining something equivalent. This loss aversion means that the fear of losing what you have often outweighs the excitement of getting something new, creating a natural tendency toward caution and maintaining the status quo. If someone offered you a bet where you had a 50% chance of winning $100 and a 50% chance of losing $100, you'd probably decline even though mathematically it's a fair wager. The potential pain of losing $100 feels more significant than the potential pleasure of winning the same amount, making the bet feel like a bad deal even when the odds are equal. This loss aversion shapes your behavior in countless ways. You might stay in an unsatisfying job because the security you'd lose feels more important than the potential benefits of a new position. You might avoid ending relationships that aren't working because the loss of familiarity and shared history feels worse than the potential gain of freedom and new possibilities. The tendency extends beyond material losses to include threats to your identity, status, beliefs, or any other aspect of your current situation that you value. Changing your mind about something important can feel like losing your previous beliefs, even when the new perspective is objectively better. Taking on new challenges can feel like risking your current competence and confidence. Loss aversion probably evolved because in harsh survival conditions, losing essential resources could be fatal while gaining extra resources provided diminishing returns. Your ancestors who were cautious about potential losses were more likely to survive and reproduce than those who took risks for marginal gains. Understanding loss aversion can help you recognize when fear of loss is preventing you from making beneficial changes. Chapter 63: Overvaluing What You Own. Once something becomes yours, your brain automatically begins to value it more highly than it did when it belonged to someone else. This endowment effect means that you often demand more money to sell something you own than you would have been willing to pay to buy the same item, creating an irrational attachment that can influence everything from major financial decisions to everyday choices about what to keep and what to discard. This psychological phenomenon reveals itself in countless situations. The car that seemed reasonably priced when you were shopping for it suddenly feels more valuable when it's time to trade it in. The clothes hanging in your closet that you never wear still feel worth keeping because they're yours. The house you're considering selling seems more valuable to you than identical houses seem to potential buyers. Your sense of ownership changes your relationship with objects, making them feel like extensions of yourself rather than just possessions. Losing something you own doesn't just feel like a transaction, it feels like losing a part of your extended identity. This psychological investment makes everything you own seem more valuable than neutral market assessments would suggest. The endowment effect probably evolved because in small communities, maintaining possession of useful items contributed to survival and status. Your ancestors who valued and protected their possessions were more likely to have resources available when needed. This attachment to owned objects served important practical functions. Today, this same psychology can sometimes work against your interests, making it difficult to let go of possessions that no longer serve you, sell assets at appropriate times, or make rational economic decisions about buying and selling. You might hold on to investments too long, accumulate clutter you can't bear to discard, or overestimate the value of items you're trying to sell. Chapter 64: Only Hearing Success Stories. Your perception of how often people succeed or fail at various endeavors can become seriously distorted by the simple fact that success stories are much more visible and widely shared than failure stories. This survivorship bias means you're constantly exposed to examples of people who achieved their goals while remaining largely unaware of the many more people who attempted similar things but didn't succeed. When you read about successful entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, or anyone who has achieved something impressive, you're seeing only the survivors of a much larger group of people who tried similar paths. For every successful startup founder you hear about, there might be dozens or hundreds who attempted to build companies but failed. For every published author, there might be countless aspiring writers whose manuscripts were never accepted. This skewed sample of information can create unrealistic expectations about your own likelihood of success in various ventures. When you only see examples of people who made it, challenges can seem more surmountable and success rates can seem higher than they actually are. The hidden failures don't inform your decision-making because they're invisible. Survivorship bias affects more than just career choices. In health and wellness, you might hear many stories about people who recovered from illness or transformed their fitness, but fewer stories about those whose conditions didn't improve or whose healthy lifestyle changes didn't produce dramatic results. This can create unrealistic expectations about what medical treatments or lifestyle changes can accomplish. The same bias appears in advice and life strategies. The people who write books, give talks, or share wisdom about how to live successfully are, by definition, people for whom their approaches worked. Chapter 65: Incompetent people who think they're experts. There's a curious psychological phenomenon where people with limited knowledge or skill in a particular area often overestimate their competence, while those with genuine expertise tend to underestimate their abilities. This Dunning-Kruger effect reveals how the same lack of knowledge that leads to poor performance also prevents people from recognizing their own incompetence. When you first start learning something new, you might feel quite confident after acquiring just basic knowledge. This initial confidence comes partly from not yet knowing enough to recognize how much you don't know. The complexity and nuance that become apparent to experts remain invisible to beginners, creating an illusion of understanding that exceeds actual competence. This overconfidence in the early stages of learning isn't necessarily a character flaw. It might actually serve useful functions by providing the motivation needed to continue learning despite inevitable mistakes and setbacks. If beginners fully appreciated how difficult their chosen field was, they might become discouraged before developing real expertise. The effect is particularly noticeable in areas where a little knowledge can seem like a lot. Someone who reads a few articles about psychology, nutrition, or investing might feel qualified to give advice, not realizing how much depth and nuance they're missing. Their limited knowledge provides enough vocabulary and concepts to feel informed without revealing the vast complexity that experts understand. Conversely, people with genuine expertise often underestimate their abilities because they're acutely aware of how much they still don't know. True experts recognize the complexity of their fields, the ongoing debates and uncertainties, and the limitations of current knowledge. This awareness can make them more humble about their competence than their actual skill level warrants. Chapter 66: Feeling like a fraud. Even when you've achieved genuine success and recognition, you might sometimes feel like you don't truly deserve your accomplishments, that you've somehow fooled everyone into thinking you're more competent than you really are. This imposter syndrome creates persistent anxiety that others will discover you're not as qualified, talented, or deserving as they believe you to be. These feelings can persist despite clear evidence of your competence and achievements. You might have degrees, awards, positive feedback, and successful track records, yet still feel internally like you're pretending to be something you're not. Your successes feel like accidents or luck rather than reflections of your actual abilities and efforts. Imposter syndrome often intensifies during transitions to new roles or higher levels of responsibility. When you're promoted, start a new job, or take on challenging projects, the gap between your internal sense of competence and external expectations can create intense self-doubt. You might worry that you'll be exposed as unqualified or inadequate. This phenomenon is particularly common among high achievers who set demanding standards for themselves. The very drive for excellence that leads to success can also create internal pressure to be perfect, making normal learning curves and occasional mistakes feel like evidence of fraudulence rather than natural parts of growth and development. Imposter syndrome can also be triggered by being one of few people from your background in a particular setting. When you're underrepresented in your field, normal challenges and setbacks might feel like confirmation that you don't belong, rather than typical experiences that everyone faces regardless of their background. The irony is that imposter syndrome often indicates competence rather than incompetence. Chapter 67: Expectations Creating Reality. Your beliefs about what will happen in any given situation have a remarkable power to influence what actually does happen, creating a subtle but significant connection between your mental expectations and the reality you experience. This expectancy effect means that your predictions about outcomes often become self-fulfilling prophecies, shaping not just your perception of events but the events themselves. When you expect someone to be friendly, you're more likely to approach them with warmth and openness, which increases the likelihood that they'll respond positively to you. When you expect a social situation to be enjoyable, you're more likely to engage enthusiastically and contribute to creating the positive atmosphere you anticipated. Your expectations shape your behavior, which influences others' responses, which confirms your original expectations. This process works in both positive and negative directions. If you expect a meeting to be boring and unproductive, you might approach it with low energy and minimal engagement, potentially contributing to the very outcome you predicted. If you expect learning something new to be difficult and frustrating, your anxiety and negative attitude might actually make the learning process more challenging than it needs to be. The expectancy effect is particularly powerful in interpersonal relationships. When you believe someone is trustworthy, intelligent, or kind, you're more likely to interact with them in ways that bring out those qualities. When you have negative expectations about someone, you might unconsciously behave in ways that trigger defensive or unpleasant responses, confirming your initial assumptions. This phenomenon extends beyond immediate social interactions to longer-term outcomes. Chapter 68: Making Your Own Predictions Come True. When you form strong beliefs about how you'll perform in a particular situation, those beliefs often shape your preparation, effort, and behavior in ways that make your predictions remarkably accurate. This self-fulfilling prophecy demonstrates how your internal expectations can become external reality through the subtle but powerful influence of belief on behavior. If you believe you'll do poorly on a presentation, you might unconsciously prepare less thoroughly, approach the situation with higher anxiety, and focus more on potential problems than opportunities. This changed behavior increases the likelihood that your performance will indeed be disappointing, confirming your original negative prediction. Conversely, when you believe you'll handle a challenge successfully, you're more likely to prepare adequately, approach the situation with confidence, and persist through difficulties. This positive expectation influences your behavior in ways that increase your chances of actual success, making your optimistic prediction more likely to come true. The process isn't magical thinking, it's a practical demonstration of how beliefs influence behavior, which influences outcomes. Your expectations affect how much effort you invest, what strategies you choose, how you interpret setbacks, and how others respond to you. These behavioral changes create measurable differences in results. Self-fulfilling prophecies are particularly powerful in areas where confidence and persistence significantly impact outcomes. Social interactions, athletic performance, creative endeavors, and learning new skills all benefit from positive expectations because belief influences the effort and resilience needed for success in these domains. The phenomenon can also explain why some negative patterns persist in people's lives. Chapter 69: The Power of Fake Medicine. Your mind possesses remarkable healing capabilities that can be activated by belief alone, even when the treatment you receive contains no active medical ingredients. This placebo effect demonstrates how your expectations about getting better can trigger genuine physiological improvements, revealing the profound connection between psychological states and physical health. When you believe you're receiving effective treatment, your brain can initiate healing responses that include reduced pain, decreased inflammation, improved immune function, and enhanced recovery from various conditions. These aren't just subjective improvements in how you feel, they're measurable changes in your body's functioning that occur purely through the power of expectation and belief. The placebo effect is so reliable and significant that medical researchers must account for it in every study of new treatments. Any effective medication or therapy must work better than placebo to be considered genuinely beneficial, because the improvement from expectation alone can be substantial enough to mask or mimic real therapeutic effects. This healing response appears to work through several mechanisms. Believing you'll feel better can reduce stress and anxiety, which allows your immune system to function more effectively. Positive expectations can trigger the release of your body's natural pain-relieving chemicals, providing genuine relief from discomfort. Hope and optimism can improve sleep, appetite, and energy levels, all of which support recovery. The effect is particularly strong for conditions that involve pain, mood, or subjective symptoms, but it can influence objective measures too. Blood pressure, heart rate, hormone levels, and immune markers can all improve in response to placebo treatments, demonstrating that the mind's influence on the body extends far beyond just feeling better. Chapter 70: Performing Better When Watched. When you know you're being observed by others, something interesting happens to your performance on tasks you've already mastered. You often do even better than you would alone. This social facilitation effect transforms the awareness of being watched into enhanced focus and energy that can elevate your abilities beyond their usual levels. Your nervous system responds to social observation by increasing arousal and alertness, much like a performer who feels energized by an audience. This heightened state can sharpen your concentration, increase your motivation, and help you access peak performance capabilities that might remain dormant when you're working in solitude. The effect is particularly strong for activities you're confident about and skilled in. A practiced musician might play more expressively in front of an audience, an experienced athlete might push themselves harder during competition, or a skilled cook might create more carefully crafted meals when preparing for guests rather than just for themselves. This performance boost happens because your brain recognizes the social significance of being observed and automatically allocates more resources to the task at hand. The primitive part of your nervous system that evolved to help you succeed in front of your tribe activates, bringing additional energy and focus to bear on whatever you're doing. However, this same social awareness can have the opposite effect when you're learning something new or working on tasks where you feel uncertain about your abilities. In these situations, the pressure of being watched can increase anxiety and interfere with performance, creating the stage fright or test anxiety that can disrupt your natural capabilities. Understanding social facilitation can help you strategically use audience effects to enhance your performance. Chapter 71: Work Expanding to Fill Available Time. Have you ever noticed that tasks seem to take exactly as much time as you have available to complete them? This phenomenon, known as Parkinson's Law, reveals how work naturally expands to fill whatever time frame you assign to it, often regardless of the task's actual complexity or requirements. When you have all day to complete a project that could reasonably be finished in 2 hours, you'll likely find yourself taking the full day. You might spend extra time on minor details, take longer breaks, work at a more leisurely pace, or add unnecessary refinements that wouldn't occur to you if you had a tighter deadline. This expansion isn't necessarily procrastination or laziness, it often involves genuine additional effort and attention that can improve quality. But it also suggests that many tasks are more flexible in their time requirements than you might initially assume. The same project completed under time pressure might be 90% as good while taking 50% as long. Your brain seems to automatically calibrate effort and efficiency based on available time. When deadlines are generous, your internal sense of urgency decreases, allowing for a more relaxed and exploratory approach. When time is limited, your focus sharpens and your decision-making becomes more decisive, often resulting in faster completion without proportional loss of quality. This principle can be both helpful and problematic. It's helpful when you want to do especially thorough or thoughtful work and have the luxury of time to invest. It becomes problematic when unlimited time leads to perfectionism, indecision, or inefficient work habits that prevent you from accomplishing other important goals. Understanding Parkinson's Law can help you use time constraints strategically. Setting artificial deadlines for yourself, even when external pressure doesn't exist, can help you work more efficiently and complete tasks in reasonable timeframes. Chapter 72: Unfinished Tasks Haunting Your Mind. Your mind has a curious tendency to keep thinking about tasks that remain incomplete, even when you're trying to focus on other things. This Zeigarnik effect means that unfinished projects, conversations, or commitments can occupy mental bandwidth throughout your day, creating a gentle but persistent background hum of things that need attention. Incomplete tasks seem to remain psychologically open in your mental filing system, continuing to draw attention and cognitive resources even when you're not actively working on them. You might find yourself thinking about an unfinished report during dinner, or having an incomplete conversation replay in your mind while you're trying to watch a movie. This mental persistence probably evolved to help ensure that important tasks actually get completed. In ancestral environments, forgetting about partially finished activities, like food preparation or tool making, could have serious survival consequences. Your brain developed systems to keep track of incomplete goals and motivate you to return to them. The effect can be both helpful and burdensome in modern life. On the positive side, it helps ensure that you don't forget important commitments and provides ongoing motivation to complete projects you've started. The mental pressure can prevent procrastination and help you maintain momentum on complex, multi-stage tasks. However, the same mechanism can also create stress and mental clutter when you have many incomplete tasks simultaneously. Each unfinished project occupies some portion of your attention, reducing the mental clarity available for whatever you're currently trying to focus on. This can lead to feeling scattered or overwhelmed. You can work with the Zeigarnik effect by strategically completing small tasks when possible, rather than leaving numerous minor items perpetually unfinished. Chapter 73: Remembering what stands out. Your memory has a natural preference for information that somehow breaks patterns, violates expectations, or stands out from the routine background of daily experience. This von Riestorff effect, also known as the isolation effect, means that distinctive events are much more likely to be remembered than ordinary ones, shaping your recollections in ways that emphasize the unusual over the typical. Think about your memories from the past year. You probably remember specific moments when something surprising, emotional, or unusual happened more clearly than the countless ordinary days that followed routine patterns. The birthday celebration stands out more than regular dinners, the unexpected compliment is more memorable than routine interactions, and the day something went wrong is clearer than many days when everything went smoothly. This selective memory for distinctive events serves useful functions. Unusual occurrences often signal important changes in your environment that deserve attention and learning. Remembering exceptions to patterns helps you notice when situations are different from normal, potentially alerting you to opportunities or threats that require adaptive responses. However, this memory bias can also distort your overall sense of how life usually unfolds. When you primarily remember the most distinctive experiences, both positive and negative, you might lose touch with the reality that most of life consists of ordinary, unremarkable moments that don't create strong memories despite being the actual substance of daily experience. The isolation effect can make dramatic or problematic events seem more frequent than they actually are, simply because they're more memorable. Chapter 74: Liking things more after seeing them often. Your preferences are subtly shaped by familiarity in ways you might not consciously notice. The mere exposure effect means that you tend to develop positive feelings toward people, objects, ideas, or experiences simply because you encounter them repeatedly, even when there's no logical reason why repetition should influence your opinion. This psychological phenomenon helps explain why you might gradually warm up to songs you initially disliked after hearing them multiple times on the radio, or why you might develop affection for a coworker's quirky habits that initially seemed annoying. Repeated exposure, by itself, tends to generate increasingly positive responses over time. The effect works best with neutral or mildly positive initial impressions. If your first reaction to something is strongly negative, mere exposure is unlikely to transform it into something you love. But for the vast majority of experiences that fall into the neutral to moderately positive range, familiarity breeds liking rather than contempt. This preference for the familiar probably evolved because things you encounter repeatedly in your environment are more likely to be safe than genuinely novel stimuli that could represent unknown threats. Your brain learned to associate familiarity with safety and predictability, creating positive emotional responses to recognize patterns and experiences. The mere exposure effect influences everything from your taste in art and music to your comfort with different types of people and ideas. The foods you grew up eating, the architectural styles you saw regularly in childhood, and the communication patterns of your family all feel right partly because of their familiarity rather than their objective qualities. Understanding this bias can help you recognize when your preferences might be based more on familiarity than on careful evaluation. Chapter 75: How Children's Minds Grow. A child's mind develops through predictable stages of cognitive growth, each building upon the previous one, like floors of a house being constructed in sequence. Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget discovered that children don't just know less than adults, they actually think in qualitatively different ways, with mental capabilities emerging in an orderly progression that reflects the brain's natural development patterns. In the earliest stage, infants experience the world primarily through their senses and motor actions. They learn by touching, tasting, looking, and moving, gradually discovering that they are separate from the objects around them. During this sensoromotor period, a baby's intelligence is literally hands-on, expressed through physical exploration rather than abstract thinking. As language develops, children enter a stage where symbolic thinking becomes possible but remains quite concrete. They can use words to represent things that aren't present and engage in pretend play, but their logic is still tied closely to specific, tangible experiences rather than abstract concepts or hypothetical situations. During middle childhood, logical thinking emerges but remains grounded in concrete reality. Children can understand cause and effect, categorize objects systematically, and solve problems that involve real, manipulable situations. However, they still struggle with purely hypothetical problems or abstract reasoning that isn't connected to concrete experience. Finally, in adolescence, the capacity for formal operational thinking develops, allowing for abstract reasoning, systematic hypothesis testing, and thinking about thinking itself. Teenagers become capable of considering multiple variables simultaneously, reasoning about purely hypothetical situations, and engaging with complex moral and philosophical questions. Chapter 76: When Babies Learn Objects Exist. One of the most fundamental discoveries a baby makes is that objects continue to exist even when they can't be seen. This object permanence develops gradually during the first 2 years of life, representing a crucial milestone in understanding the nature of physical reality and forming the foundation for more complex thinking about the world. In the earliest months, when a toy is hidden under a blanket, a baby will act as if it has simply disappeared from existence. Out of sight truly means out of mind during this stage, because the infant's understanding of reality is limited to immediate sensory experience. If something can't be seen, heard, or touched, it simply doesn't exist in their mental world. Around 8 to 12 months, babies begin to search for hidden objects, demonstrating their growing understanding that things maintain their existence even when temporarily invisible. This seemingly simple ability actually represents a profound cognitive achievement, the capacity to maintain mental representations of things that aren't currently being perceived. The development of object permanence parallels the growth of memory and symbolic thinking. To search for a hidden toy, a baby must remember that the toy existed, maintain a mental image of it while it's hidden, and understand that their actions can reveal it again. These capacities form the building blocks for more sophisticated thinking about relationships between cause and effect. Interestingly, even after babies understand that objects continue to exist when hidden, they often make systematic errors that reveal the gradual nature of this learning. They might search for an object in the first place it was hidden, even after watching it being moved to a new location. Their understanding of object permanence is developing but not yet complete. Chapter 77: Reading Other People's Minds. One of the most sophisticated abilities you developed as a child was learning to understand that other people have their own thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and perspectives that might be different from yours. This theory of mind emerges gradually during early childhood and represents a crucial milestone in social and emotional development that shapes how you navigate relationships throughout your life. Before developing theory of mind, young children assume that everyone knows what they know and feels what they feel. If a 3-year-old knows where a toy is hidden, they assume everyone else knows too. If they feel sad, they might be confused why others don't automatically offer comfort. Their own mental state is the only one they can really understand or imagine. Around age 4 or 5, children begin to understand that other people can have beliefs that are different from their own, and that these beliefs might even be incorrect. In classic experiments, children watch someone hide an object in one location, then see it move to a different location while the first person is absent. Younger children predict the person will look in the new location, where they know it actually is, while older children understand the person will look in the original location, where they believe it still is. This ability to understand others' mental states becomes increasingly sophisticated throughout childhood and continues developing into adolescence and adulthood. You learn to recognize not just that others have different thoughts, but that they might have different values, priorities, emotional responses, and ways of interpreting the same situations. Theory of mind enables empathy, communication, deception, cooperation, and virtually all complex social interactions. When you explain something to someone, you automatically consider what they already know and what they need to learn. Chapter 78: How we form emotional bonds. The deep emotional connections you form with important people in your life follow patterns that were first established in your earliest relationships with caregivers. This attachment system shapes not only how you bonded with parents or guardians as a child, but also influences how you approach intimate relationships, handle separation and loss, and regulate emotions throughout your entire life. During infancy, you developed either secure or insecure attachment patterns based on how consistently and sensitively your caregivers responded to your needs. If they were generally available, responsive, and comforting when you were distressed, you likely developed a secure attachment style that serves as a foundation for healthy relationships throughout life. Secure attachment creates an internal sense that relationships are generally safe, that others can be trusted to be there when needed, and that you are worthy of love and care. People with secure attachment typically find it relatively easy to get close to others, feel comfortable depending on partners, and don't worry excessively about being abandoned or rejected. However, if early caregiving was inconsistent, neglectful, or frightening, you might have developed insecure attachment patterns as adaptive responses to difficult circumstances. These patterns helped you survive and cope with challenging early relationships, but they can create difficulties in adult relationships if they persist beyond their original protective function. Anxious attachment develops when caregiving is inconsistent, sometimes responsive, sometimes not. This creates a hypervigilant approach to relationships, with intense desires for closeness combined with fears of abandonment. People with anxious attachment often seek frequent reassurance and may struggle with jealousy or worry about their partner's commitment. Chapter 79: The Best Time to Learn Languages. Your brain possesses a remarkable window of opportunity during childhood when learning new languages happens with an ease and naturalness that becomes much more difficult to achieve in adulthood. This process works best when you observe people who are similar to you in relevant ways and who are successfully achieving outcomes you desire. Your brain is more likely to encode and attempt to replicate behaviors when they're demonstrated by models you can identify with and when the results seem attainable for someone in your situation. The power of observational learning extends beyond specific skills to general approaches and attitudes. When you watch how someone responds to stress, handles criticism, or maintains relationships, you're not just learning specific techniques, you're absorbing overall strategies for living that can influence your own behavior in countless future situations. Interestingly, you don't always consciously decide to imitate what you observe. Much of this learning happens automatically, below the threshold of awareness. You might find yourself unconsciously adopting the communication style of a respected colleague, the problem-solving approach of a successful friend, or even the posture and mannerisms of people you spend time with regularly. This automatic imitation can be both beneficial and problematic. When you're surrounded by positive role models who demonstrate healthy behaviors, you naturally absorb helpful patterns. But when you're frequently exposed to negative or destructive behaviors, you might unconsciously pick up unhelpful habits and approaches. The key to maximizing observational learning is becoming more conscious about who you choose as models and what behaviors you want to emulate. Instead of randomly absorbing whatever you're exposed to, you can actively seek out examples of the kinds of behaviors, attitudes, and approaches you want to develop in yourself. Chapter 80: Born Ready to Speak. From the moment you took your first breath, your brain came equipped with an amazing gift: you were already wired for language. This isn't something you had to learn from scratch, it's something you were born knowing how to do. Even as a tiny baby, your mind could hear the difference between sounds that adults can no longer distinguish. You could tell apart subtle differences in how people pronounced words, differences that would later help you master whatever language surrounded you. Your brain was like a universal translator, ready to crack the code of any language it encountered. Within your first few months, you began making sounds, not random noises, but systematic experiments with your voice. You were testing out the equipment, learning how your tongue, lips, and breath could work together. This babbling wasn't meaningless chatter, it was your brain practicing the building blocks of communication. What's remarkable is that children all over the world follow the same basic pattern of language development, regardless of which language they're learning. They start with simple sounds, then single words, then two-word combinations, then longer sentences. This universal sequence suggests that language learning follows a blueprint already present in the human brain. Your early language development happened so naturally that you probably have no memory of the incredible feat you accomplished. You figured out that certain sounds had meanings, that word order mattered, and that you could use this system to get what you needed and share what you were thinking. This natural language ability stays with you throughout life, making it possible to continue learning new ways to express yourself and connect with others through words. Chapter 81: Learning with Help from Others. Throughout your development, you never learned completely on your own. Instead, you grew and developed through countless interactions with people who could do just a little bit more than you could at any given moment. This collaborative learning happens in what researchers call your zone of proximal development, that sweet spot where tasks are challenging enough to help you grow, but not so difficult that you become frustrated or give up. It's the space between what you can do alone and what seems impossible, where learning happens most effectively. Think about how you learned to ride a bicycle. Someone likely ran alongside you, holding the bike steady while you pedaled, gradually letting go as you gained confidence and balance. They provided just enough support to keep you moving forward without taking away the challenge of learning. This same principle applies to intellectual and emotional development throughout your life. The people who help you learn don't always have to be teachers or parents. Sometimes a slightly older sibling, a peer, or even someone you're teaching can provide the scaffolding that helps you reach the next level of understanding. When you explain something to someone else, you often deepen your own understanding in the process. This collaborative approach to learning means that your development is always social. You grow not in isolation, but through relationships and interactions that challenge you to stretch beyond your current abilities while providing the support you need to succeed. The guidance and encouragement you receive from others becomes internalized over time, eventually becoming the inner voice that helps you tackle new challenges independently. Chapter 82: Building Knowledge Step by Step. Your mind doesn't absorb information like a sponge randomly soaking up water. Instead, it builds understanding methodically, constructing knowledge piece by piece in a way that makes sense and connects to what you already know. This process works like building with blocks. Each new piece of information needs to fit with the structure you've already built, or you need to reorganize your existing understanding to accommodate the new piece. Sometimes this means making small adjustments to your mental model, and sometimes it means rebuilding entire sections to make room for new insights. When you encounter something completely new, your brain works hard to find connections to familiar concepts. It's constantly asking, what does this remind me of, and how does this fit with what I already know? This natural tendency to connect new information to existing knowledge is what makes learning stick. The building process isn't always smooth or linear. Sometimes you might think you understand something, only to discover that your understanding was incomplete when you encounter more complex examples. These moments of confusion aren't failures, they're signs that your mind is actively working to construct a more accurate and complete understanding. Your knowledge structure becomes more stable and flexible as you add more interconnected pieces. Like a well-built framework, it can support new additions and withstand challenges to your understanding. The more connections you can make between different pieces of information, the stronger and more useful your knowledge becomes. This step-by-step construction process continues throughout your life, allowing you to build increasingly sophisticated understanding of the world around you. Chapter 83: Right and Wrong Through Life. Your sense of right and wrong isn't fixed, it evolves and deepens as you move through different stages of life. What seemed like clear moral rules in childhood gradually becomes a more nuanced understanding of ethics and human relationships. As a young child, you likely thought about right and wrong in terms of rules and consequences. Something was wrong if it got you in trouble, and right if it earned approval. Your moral compass was largely external, guided by the reactions of authority figures around you. During your teenage years, your moral thinking probably shifted toward fairness and social approval. You began considering what others would think and whether actions seemed fair to everyone involved. Questions of loyalty, justice, and social harmony became more important in how you evaluated right and wrong. As you've matured, your moral reasoning has likely become more complex and personal. You might now consider abstract principles, long-term consequences, and competing values when facing ethical decisions. You've learned that moral choices often involve balancing different goods rather than simply choosing between right and wrong. Your moral development is influenced by your experiences, relationships, and the moral communities you've been part of. Each new situation teaches you something about the complexity of human behavior and the challenges of living ethically in a complicated world. What remains constant through these changes is your capacity to care about doing the right thing. Even as your understanding of morality becomes more sophisticated, the fundamental human desire to act ethically continues to guide your choices and relationships. Chapter 84: Finding Out Who You Are. The question, "Who am I?" has probably occupied your thoughts more during some periods of life than others, but it's a question that continues to evolve as you do. Your sense of identity isn't something you discover once and then keep forever, it's something you actively construct and reconstruct throughout your life. During adolescence, identity formation becomes particularly intense. You likely experimented with different roles, interests, and ways of expressing yourself as you figured out what felt authentic and what felt forced. This exploration might have felt confusing or overwhelming at times, but it was a necessary part of developing a coherent sense of self. Your identity forms through both internal reflection and external feedback. You learn about yourself by paying attention to your thoughts, feelings, and reactions, but also through how others respond to you and the roles you take on in different relationships and situations. The process of identity formation involves both commitment and flexibility. You develop core values and characteristics that feel central to who you are, while remaining open to growth and change. The healthiest identities are both stable and adaptable. Your sense of identity is multifaceted, you're not just one thing. You might be a friend, a professional, a family member, a creator, a learner, all at the same time. These different aspects of yourself might even seem contradictory sometimes, and that's perfectly normal. As you continue to grow and have new experiences, your understanding of yourself deepens and becomes more nuanced. You become more comfortable with complexity and ambiguity, both in yourself and in your relationships with others. Chapter 85: Your Brain's Ability to Change. One of the most hopeful discoveries in neuroscience is that your brain never stops changing. Throughout your entire life, your brain continues to form new connections, strengthen existing pathways, and even generate new brain cells in certain areas. This remarkable flexibility is called neuroplasticity. When you learn something new, whether it's a skill, a fact, or a way of thinking, physical changes occur in your brain. Neural pathways that get used frequently become stronger and more efficient, while those that aren't used gradually weaken. It's like paths through a forest, the ones that get walked regularly become clearer and easier to travel. This plasticity means that habits, thoughts patterns, and even personality traits that feel fixed can actually be changed with consistent effort over time. Your brain is constantly rewiring itself based on your experiences and the mental exercises you choose to practice. The brain's ability to change is particularly pronounced during childhood and adolescence, but it continues throughout adulthood. While it might take more time and effort to create new neural pathways as you get older, it's never impossible. Every time you challenge yourself to learn something new, you're literally reshaping your brain. This understanding has profound implications for how you think about personal growth and healing. Patterns of thinking that cause you distress, skills you wish you had, or aspects of yourself you'd like to strengthen can all be influenced through the deliberate practice of new ways of thinking and behaving. Your brain's plasticity is both a gift and a responsibility. It means you have more control over your mental development than you might have realized. Chapter 86: Never Too Old to Learn. There's a common myth that learning becomes much harder as you get older, but research shows that your brain remains remarkably capable of acquiring new knowledge and skills throughout your entire life. While the way you learn might change with age, your capacity for growth never disappears. As an adult learner, you actually have several advantages over younger learners. You have a vast store of existing knowledge and experience to connect new information to, making it easier to understand complex concepts. You also have better metacognitive skills. You know more about how you learn best and can choose strategies that work for your particular style and situation. Your motivation for learning as an adult often comes from genuine interest or practical need rather than external requirements, which can make the learning process more engaging and meaningful. When you choose to learn something because you want to, rather than because you have to, you're likely to be more persistent and creative in your approach. While it's true that certain types of memory and processing speed may decline slightly with age, other cognitive abilities actually improve. Your ability to see patterns, make connections between different domains of knowledge, and understand complex relationships often gets better with experience. The key to successful adult learning is often adapting your methods to work with your brain's changing needs. This might mean taking more time to process information, using more visual or hands-on approaches, or breaking complex topics into smaller, manageable pieces. Every new skill you develop, every book you read, and every problem you solve creates new neural pathways and keeps your brain active and flexible. Learning isn't just about acquiring knowledge, it's about maintaining your mental vitality and staying engaged with the world around you. Chapter 87: The Science of Effective Studying. If you've ever wondered why some study methods work better than others, science has uncovered some clear principles that can make your learning more efficient and lasting. These discoveries can transform how you approach any kind of learning, whether for work, school, or personal interests. One of the most powerful techniques is called retrieval practice, actively trying to remember information rather than just rereading it. When you close your book and try to recall what you've learned, you're strengthening the neural pathways that will help you access that information later. This might feel more difficult than passive review, but that difficulty is actually a sign that learning is happening. Another key principle is distributed practice, spreading your study sessions out over time rather than cramming everything into one long session. Your brain needs time to consolidate new information, and repeated exposure over several days or weeks creates much stronger memories than the same amount of time spent in one marathon session. Elaborative interrogation is another effective technique, asking yourself why and how questions about what you're learning. Instead of just memorizing facts, you're building understanding by creating connections and explanations. This deeper processing makes information much easier to remember and apply. Dual coding involves using both visual and verbal elements when you study. Drawing diagrams, creating mind maps, or explaining concepts out loud engages different parts of your brain and creates multiple pathways to the same information. These techniques work because they align with how your brain naturally processes and stores information. By understanding and applying these principles, you can make your learning more effective and enjoyable. Chapter 88: Testing Yourself to Remember More. Testing yourself might feel like a stressful way to study, but it's actually one of the most powerful tools for strengthening memory and understanding. When you quiz yourself on material you've learned, you're not just checking what you know, you're actively improving your ability to remember it later. This process, called the testing effect, works because retrieving information from memory strengthens the neural pathways associated with that knowledge. Each time you successfully recall something, you make it easier to remember in the future. It's like exercising a muscle. The more you work it, the stronger it becomes. Self-testing is most effective when it's challenging but not impossible. If you can answer questions too easily, you're not pushing your brain to work hard enough. If the questions are too difficult, you might become discouraged. The sweet spot is when you have to think and work to come up with the answer, but you can usually get there. You don't need formal tests or quizzes to use this technique. You can create flashcards, write practice questions, or simply close your book and try to explain what you've learned in your own words. The key is actively retrieving information rather than passively reviewing it. Making mistakes during self-testing isn't a problem, it's part of the learning process. When you get something wrong, you're identifying gaps in your knowledge that need attention. Correcting these errors and then testing yourself again strengthens both your understanding and your memory. Regular self-testing also helps you gauge your actual level of knowledge rather than relying on the false confidence that can come from familiarity with material. Chapter 89: Mixing Topics While Learning. When you're learning multiple related concepts or skills, your instinct might be to master one completely before moving to the next. However, research shows that mixing different topics together during study sessions, a technique called interleaving, often leads to better long-term learning and understanding. Interleaving works because it forces your brain to actively distinguish between different types of problems or concepts. When you practice the same thing repeatedly, your brain can go on autopilot. But when you mix different topics together, you have to stay alert and actively choose the right approach for each new problem. This technique might feel more difficult and confusing at first. You might make more mistakes initially, and your performance during practice might seem worse than if you studied each topic separately. But this temporary difficulty leads to stronger learning in the long run. Think about learning to identify different types of birds. If you study robins for an hour, then cardinals for an hour, you might feel confident during each session. But if you mix the different species together, you're forced to really learn the distinguishing features that separate one type from another. The same principle applies to academic subjects, work skills, and even physical activities. A basketball player who practices only free throws for 30 minutes might feel confident, but mixing free throws with layups and three-pointers forces them to develop better decision-making and technique. Interleaving requires patience with yourself as you adjust to this more challenging but ultimately more effective approach to learning. Chapter 90: Being in the Zone. You've probably experienced moments when you were completely absorbed in an activity, time seemed to disappear, self-consciousness melted away, and you performed at your best with seemingly effortless focus. Psychologists call this state flow, and understanding how it works can help you access it more often. Flow happens when you're engaged in an activity that matches your skill level with an appropriate level of challenge. If the task is too easy, you become bored. If it's too difficult, you become anxious. But when the challenge is just right, you can enter this state of optimal experience where everything seems to click. During flow, your attention becomes completely focused on the present moment and the task at hand. Worries about the past or future fade away, and even your sense of self can become less prominent. You're not thinking about how you're doing or what others might think, you're simply doing. This state is characterized by a sense of effortless control. You feel like you're performing well, but without strain or struggle. Actions and awareness merge together in a way that feels both powerful and natural. To increase your chances of experiencing flow, look for activities where you can gradually increase the challenge as your skills improve. Create environments with minimal distractions and give yourself permission to become fully absorbed in what you're doing. Flow isn't just about peak performance, it's also associated with increased happiness and life satisfaction. These moments of complete engagement remind you of your capacity for deep focus and meaningful experience. Chapter 91: What Really Motivates People. Understanding what truly motivates people, including yourself, can transform how you approach goals, work, and relationships. While external rewards like money and recognition can influence behavior, research reveals that the most powerful and sustainable motivation comes from within. 3 fundamental psychological needs drive human motivation: autonomy, competence, and connection. When these needs are satisfied, you naturally feel more motivated, engaged, and satisfied with your activities. Autonomy means having a sense of choice and control over your actions. Even when you have responsibilities and constraints, feeling like you have some say in how you approach tasks makes a huge difference in your motivation level. People perform better and feel happier when they feel like agents of their own actions rather than pawns being moved by external forces. Competence involves feeling effective and capable of achieving desired outcomes. You're most motivated when engaging in activities that challenge your skills without overwhelming them. This is why learning new things and gradually mastering them feels so satisfying. You're experiencing your own growing competence. Connection refers to feeling related to others and experiencing a sense of belonging. Humans are fundamentally social beings, and activities feel more meaningful when they involve caring relationships or contribute to something larger than yourself. These intrinsic motivators are much more powerful than external rewards for sustaining long-term engagement and satisfaction. When you can align your activities with these basic needs, motivation flows more naturally and consistently. Chapter 92: Setting Goals That Actually Work. Not all goals are created equal. Some inspire you to take action and persist through challenges, while others seem to drain your energy or get abandoned after a few weeks. Understanding what makes goals effective can dramatically increase your chances of achieving what you want. Effective goals are specific and concrete rather than vague and general. Instead of get in better shape, a more effective goal might be a walk for 30 minutes 5 days a week. Specific goals give your brain clear targets to aim for and make it easier to recognize when you've succeeded. Good goals are also challenging but achievable. If a goal is too easy, it won't motivate you to change your behavior. If it's impossibly difficult, you'll likely give up when you encounter obstacles. The sweet spot is goals that stretch your abilities while remaining within the realm of possibility. Breaking larger goals into smaller, manageable steps makes them less overwhelming and provides regular opportunities to experience success along the way. Each small victory builds momentum and confidence for the next step. It's also important that your goals connect to your values and what matters most to you. Goals imposed by others or chosen based on what you think you should want are much harder to maintain when motivation wavers. When your goals align with your authentic interests and values, you have more internal resources to draw upon. Regular review and adjustment of your goals helps keep them relevant and motivating as your circumstances and priorities change. Flexibility in your approach, combined with commitment to your deeper intentions, creates the best foundation for sustained progress. Chapter 93: How Colors Affect Your Mood. The colors that surround you have a subtle but real influence on how you feel and behave. While individual responses to color can vary based on personal experiences and cultural background, research has identified some consistent patterns in how different colors tend to affect human psychology. Warm colors like red, orange, and yellow tend to be energizing and stimulating. Red can increase arousal and grab attention, which is why it's often used for warning signs and urgent messages. It can also increase appetite, which explains its popularity in restaurant decor. However, too much red in a space can feel overwhelming or aggressive. Cool colors like blue, green, and purple generally have a calming and relaxing effect. Blue is often associated with feelings of peace and tranquility, and studies have shown it can actually lower blood pressure and heart rate. Green, being the color most prevalent in nature, often evokes feelings of balance and restoration. The intensity and saturation of colors also matter. Bright, highly saturated colors tend to be more stimulating and can increase energy levels, while muted, pastel versions of the same colors are more soothing and restful. Colors can also influence cognitive performance in subtle ways. Some research suggests that blue environments may enhance creative thinking, while red might improve attention to detail and accuracy on certain tasks. You can use this knowledge intentionally in your environment. Choosing colors for your workspace, bedroom, or clothing based on the mood and energy level you want to cultivate can be a simple way to support your well-being and goals. Chapter 94: Spaces that change your behavior. The physical spaces you spend time in do more than just contain your activities, they actively shape how you think, feel, and behave. Understanding this influence can help you create environments that support your goals and well-being. Cluttered spaces often lead to cluttered thinking. When your environment is disorganized, it can be harder to focus and make decisions. Your brain uses mental energy to process visual chaos, leaving less available for the tasks you want to concentrate on. Conversely, organized spaces often promote clearer thinking and better self-control. The height of ceilings affects how you think in surprising ways. Higher ceilings tend to promote more abstract, creative thinking, while lower ceilings can help with focus on detailed tasks. This is why many offices are designed with standard ceiling heights, while creative spaces often feature soaring ceilings. Natural light has powerful effects on mood, energy, and sleep patterns. Exposure to sunlight helps regulate your circadian rhythms and can improve both mental and physical health. If you spend most of your time indoors, positioning yourself near windows or taking regular outdoor breaks can make a significant difference. The presence of plants and natural elements can reduce stress and improve concentration. Even small additions like a potted plant on your desk or nature photos on your walls can have positive effects on your psychological well-being. Temperature also influences behavior and decision-making. Slightly cooler environments tend to promote alertness and analytical thinking, while warmer spaces can encourage more social and collaborative behavior. Chapter 95: Why you buy things you don't need. Your purchasing decisions are influenced by psychological factors that often operate below your conscious awareness. Understanding these influences can help you make more intentional choices about how you spend your money and what you bring into your life. One powerful influence is the concept of retail therapy, the temporary mood boost that can come from shopping. When you're feeling down or stressed, buying something new can provide a brief sense of control and pleasure. However, this feeling is usually short-lived and can lead to purchases you later regret. Marketing techniques are designed to trigger emotional responses that bypass your rational decision-making. Limited-time offers create artificial urgency. Sale prices make you feel like you're saving money, even when you're spending it. Social proof, seeing that others have bought something, makes products seem more desirable. The endowment effect means you tend to overvalue things once you imagine owning them. When you hold an item in your hands or envision it in your home, you begin to feel psychological ownership, making it harder to walk away. Your environment at the time of shopping also influences your decisions. When you're hungry, you're likely to buy more food than you need. When you're rushed or distracted, you're more susceptible to impulse purchases. Subscription services and automatic renewals take advantage of your tendency to continue with the status quo rather than actively deciding whether you still want or need the service. Awareness of these psychological influences doesn't eliminate them entirely, but it can help you pause and consider whether a purchase aligns with your actual needs and values. Chapter 96: Recognizing brands without thinking. Your brain processes brand information automatically, often recognizing and responding to brand messages before your conscious mind is even aware they're there. This unconscious brand recognition influences your choices in ways you might not realize. Brand logos, colors, and sounds become so deeply embedded in your memory through repeated exposure that you can identify them in a fraction of a second. This instant recognition isn't accidental, it's the result of carefully designed marketing strategies that aim to make brands as memorable and distinctive as possible. Your brain associates brands not just with products, but with feelings, experiences, and identity concepts. A particular logo might trigger memories of childhood, feelings of sophistication, or associations with success. These emotional connections often influence your preferences more than rational product comparisons. Many brand recognition processes happen too quickly for conscious thought. Studies show that people can recognize familiar brands and form preferences even when logos are flashed so briefly that viewers aren't consciously aware of seeing them. This automatic processing extends to brand placement in movies, TV shows, and social media. Even when you're not actively paying attention to products, your brain is still registering and storing brand information for later use. Your personal identity can become intertwined with certain brands, making your choices feel like expressions of who you are rather than simple purchasing decisions. This is why some people feel strong loyalty to particular brands and may resist trying alternatives. Understanding this unconscious processing can help you make more deliberate choices about which brands you support and how marketing messages might be influencing your decisions. Chapter 97: Changing Bad Health Habits. Breaking unhealthy habits and establishing better ones is one of the most challenging but rewarding changes you can make. Understanding the psychology behind habit formation can make this process more manageable and successful. Most bad habits serve some function in your life, even if that function is ultimately harmful. They might provide stress relief, social connection, comfort, or distraction from difficult emotions. Sustainable change often involves finding healthier ways to meet these underlying needs rather than simply trying to eliminate the behavior. The most effective approach to habit change typically involves making small, manageable adjustments rather than dramatic overnight transformations. Your brain is wired to resist sudden changes, but it can adapt gradually to new patterns when they're introduced slowly and consistently. Environmental modifications can be more powerful than willpower alone. Making healthy choices easier and unhealthy choices more difficult, by changing what you keep in your home, adjusting your daily routines, or removing tempting triggers, supports better decisions when your motivation is low. Replacing bad habits with better ones is often more effective than simply trying to stop the unwanted behavior. When you feel the urge to engage in the old habit, having a predetermined alternative gives your brain something to do instead of just resisting the impulse. Social support makes habit change much more likely to succeed. Whether through accountability partners, support groups, or simply telling friends and family about your goals, connecting with others who understand and encourage your efforts provides valuable reinforcement. Be patient with yourself during the change process. Lasting transformation takes time, and setbacks are normal parts of the journey. Chapter 98: Your Body's Stress Response. When you encounter a stressful situation, your body activates an ancient survival system designed to help you deal with immediate physical threats. Understanding how this stress response works can help you manage it more effectively in modern life. Within seconds of perceiving danger or stress, your brain triggers the release of stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. Your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes shallow, and your muscles tense as your body prepares for fight or flight. This response can give you extra energy and focus when you need it most. While this system served human ancestors well when facing predators, it can be problematic when activated by modern stressors like work deadlines, relationship conflicts, or financial concerns. Your body responds to psychological stress the same way it responds to physical danger, even when running away isn't an option. Chronic activation of your stress response can lead to physical and mental health problems. When cortisol levels remain elevated over long periods, it can affect your immune system, digestion, sleep patterns, and mood. This is why managing stress isn't just about feeling better, it's about protecting your overall health. Fortunately, you can learn to influence your stress response through various techniques. Deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, and mindfulness practices can activate your body's rest and digest system, which counteracts the stress response and helps restore balance. Regular exercise, adequate sleep, and healthy social connections also help your body manage stress more effectively. Physical activity burns off stress hormones and releases mood-improving chemicals, while social support provides emotional resources for dealing with challenges. Chapter 99: What happens when you sleep? While you sleep, your brain and body are anything but inactive. Sleep is a complex biological process during which some of your most important physical and mental maintenance occurs. Understanding what happens during sleep can help you appreciate why quality rest is so essential. During the early stages of sleep, your brain begins to slow down and your body starts to repair itself. Your muscles relax, your heart rate and breathing slow, and your body temperature drops slightly. This is when your body releases growth hormone, which helps repair tissues and supports physical recovery. As you move into deeper sleep stages, your brain waves become slower and more synchronized. This deep sleep is crucial for physical restoration and immune system function. It's also when your brain clears out metabolic waste products that have accumulated during the day, including proteins associated with Alzheimer's disease. REM, rapid eye movement, sleep is when most of your vivid dreaming occurs. During this stage, your brain is highly active, processing emotions and consolidating memories from the day. The experiences, skills, and information you encountered while awake get sorted, organized, and integrated into your long-term memory systems. Your sleep occurs in cycles, typically lasting about 90 minutes each. You usually go through 4 to 6 complete cycles during a full night's sleep, with the proportion of deep sleep higher earlier in the night and REM sleep more prominent toward morning. Disrupted or insufficient sleep interferes with all these crucial processes, which is why poor sleep affects everything from your immune system and emotional regulation to your ability to learn and remember new information. Chapter 100: Your Internal Body Clock. Deep within your brain lies a remarkable biological timekeeper that helps coordinate your body's daily rhythms with the natural cycle of day and night. This internal clock, called your circadian rhythm, influences when you feel alert or sleepy, when your body temperature rises and falls, and when various hormones are released. Your body clock is primarily synchronized by light exposure, particularly sunlight. Special cells in your eyes detect changes in light and darkness, sending signals to your brain about the time of day. This is why exposure to bright light in the morning helps you feel alert, while dimmer evening light signals that it's time to prepare for sleep. This internal timing system affects much more than just sleep. Your digestion, immune function, hormone production, and even your mood follow circadian patterns. There are optimal times of day for different types of activities based on these natural rhythms. Most people experience their lowest energy and alertness in the early morning hours, around 3 to 5 a.m., and again in mid-afternoon, around 1 to 3 p.m. Peak alertness typically occurs in late morning and early evening, though individual patterns can vary based on whether you're naturally more of a morning person or night owl. Modern life often works against your natural circadian rhythms. Artificial light, especially the blue light from screens, can confuse your internal clock by signaling that it's still daytime even late in the evening. Irregular sleep schedules, shift work, and travel across time zones can all disrupt these natural patterns. You can support your circadian rhythm by maintaining consistent sleep and wake times, getting sunlight exposure in the morning, limiting bright light in the evening, and keeping your bedroom dark and cool at night. Working with your natural rhythms rather than against them can improve your sleep, energy, and overall well-being.